Hello everyone, I'm the Creeps Cabin. I know you use these videos to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I was 7 years old the first time it happened. It was fall, one of those chilly, dry afternoons where your backpack feels heavier than it is, and every sound is sharper in the air. Leaves skittered along the sidewalk, and the sky was this pale, washed-out gray. I had a routine. Every day after school, I walked to my babysitter's house by myself. She lived just a block away from the school, and it was so normal I didn't think anything of it. Other kids were still around, either waiting for rides or heading home the other way. The yard was still noisy behind me. I turned onto the street like I always did, my backpack straps cutting a little into my shoulders, scuffed shoes scraping against the uneven sidewalk. My mind wasn't on anything. Maybe a cartoon I wanted to watch, or something dumb someone said at lunch. I wasn't in a rush. I never was. I was halfway down the block when I noticed the car. It wasn't there before, but now it was creeping along the street beside me. A pale blue sedan. Kinda old. The kind of car a grandparent might drive. I didn't really look at first. I didn't feel afraid, just aware of it. But it didn't keep driving. It slowed down more. Then the window rolled down. I remember the sound of it, mechanical and slow. That low hum of glass sliding into a door. I still wasn't looking. I just kept walking. But then a voice snapped into the air, loud and sharp like it had been thrown at me. "Come here." I stopped cold. Just like that. My legs wouldn't move. My breath caught in my throat, like I'd forgotten how to breathe in and out. "Come here. Come here." The voice got louder, more angry or desperate. I couldn't tell which. I finally looked, and the man in the driver's seat was leaning toward the open window, face twisted like he was angry, but not at me, like at something else entirely. He was older, middle-aged maybe. Dark hair but going gray at the sides, kind of messy like he'd been running his hands through it all day. His face was narrow, and I remember thinking he looked like someone who hadn't slept much. His mouth moved in tight, fast words, but I couldn't really hear what else he was saying over the sound of blood rushing in my ears. I was frozen. My hands were clamped around the straps of my backpack, so hard my knuckles turned white. I shook my head hard, over and over. Just shook it. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Stay away from Christina." Just that. Just those 4 words. And then he hit the gas and sped off. Not squealing tires or anything, just quick, smooth gone. I stood there for maybe a full minute, not moving. My stomach hurt. My heart wouldn't slow down. I didn't know what to do, so I just walked the rest of the way to my babysitter's, kind of numb. I didn't tell anyone. Not my babysitter. Not my parents. Not my teacher. Not even Christina. I didn't even think much of it after a few days. I didn't forget it, exactly. I just filed it away like a weird dream or something that didn't matter. When you're that age, your brain is still learning what danger looks like. And sometimes it gets it really wrong. Christina and I were on again, off again friends at the time. Same with another girl, Brianna. We'd all known each other since kindergarten. It was one of those weird triangle friendships where one week you're all best friends, and the next week 2 of you are whispering about the third behind her back. You'd sit next to each other at lunch like nothing happened. But then you'd feel the tension every time someone passed a note or invited someone else over for a sleepover. Still, it was what I was used to. I didn't know better. The years went on. We moved from one grade to the next. Sometimes I liked Christina, sometimes I didn't. Same with Brianna. We'd play together at recess, then ignore each other for days. Nothing unusual. I forgot about the man. I really did. I had other things to worry about, spelling tests, gym class, whose mom packed better snacks. Christina didn't seem that different from any other kid. She liked horses. She liked Lisa Frank stickers and gel pens. Sometimes she gave me gum. Sometimes she glared at me and refused to speak for a week. Then came 5th grade. I remember that year better than most. Something about being 10 or 11 just sharpens your memories. It was the year we all started realizing who we were in the social pecking order. Who had name brand shoes. Who brought extra dessert to trade. Who got picked first for dodgeball. It was the year you either started getting invited to birthday parties or you didn't. That winter, Brianna started being nice to me again after ignoring me most of the fall. She asked if I wanted to go get a pop with her from the machine in the back hallway. It was a weird hallway, not really part of the school layout, More like an addition they didn't finish properly. Concrete floor. Cold. Kind of echoey. The pop machine was always there, though, humming and clunking out cans when you hit the right buttons. I said sure. It felt like a peace offering. I had spare change. We went and bought sodas. She chatted with me about nothing. I remember she was smiling a little too much. I thought she was just being extra nice. We came back to class. I set my drink and lunch down on my desk and went to the coat hooks to grab something. When I came back, Christina was sitting at her desk, looking at me with this half smirk. She told me someone had messed with my stuff, hid it around the room, but she had found it and brought it back. I just kind of blinked at her. Didn't really think about it. I cracked open the soda. I took one sip. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. It hit my tongue and burned. Not the fizzy kind of burn. This was chemical. Bitter. Sharp. I spit it right back into the can, gagging. My throat and mouth felt raw. I ran for the water fountain, rinsing my mouth over and over until I could hardly stand up straight. Someone told the teacher. The nurse got involved. The principal. Eventually the cops. Turned out they had poured Lysol into my drink. Not a lot. Just enough to screw with me. Enough that if I hadn't spit it out, if I'd taken a few big gulps, I might have ended up in the hospital. Or worse. And they thought it was funny. Christina and her sister. Her older sister had come into the school building that day for something. I don't even remember what excuse they gave. They did it together. The school was small. 1 class per grade. No extra rooms to separate kids. So even after the police got involved and a restraining order was issued, I still had to sit in the same classroom with them. They got suspended. 3 days. Maybe 4. I don't remember if it was even a full week. I remember sitting at my desk the next day, trying not to cry, trying not to throw up, trying to pretend I wasn't afraid to touch anything. I remember Brianna avoiding my eyes. I remember Christina walking in on her first day back like nothing had happened. I don't think she even looked at me. Just slid into her chair, chewing her gum, flipping open her notebook. No one really talked about it. Kids whispered, sure. Teachers looked uncomfortable. My parents tried to raise hell, but the school couldn't or wouldn't do much more. It was a small town. Everyone knew everyone. Everything felt stuck in place. Years went by. I switched schools eventually. Made new friends. Got older. Learned more about people, about trust, about how some things don't have explanations. But I never forgot about that man in the car. Stay away from Christina. That's what he said. Not she's dangerous. Not watch out. Not even she's going to hurt you. Just those 4 words. Like a warning. Or a threat. Or a plea. I don't know. I still don't know who he was. I never saw him again. I've replayed it in my head 100 times. Maybe he was someone who knew Christina's family. Maybe he saw something, knew something. Maybe he tried to help in the only way he knew how. Or maybe he was someone dangerous himself, and I was lucky not to get in that car. I'll never know. All I know is he was right. I should have stayed away from Christina. Not because I think she's evil, or because I think she was some monster in disguise, but because some people are broken in ways that don't show on the outside. Some kids grow up in homes where love gets twisted into something else. Some learn to hurt before they learn to speak kindly. And sometimes that damage spills over onto anyone nearby. I was a quiet kid. I didn't push back much. I wanted friends, even if they were the wrong ones. I didn't understand what real danger looked like. But after that, I started to. After that, I watched people differently. I kept the soda can for a while, cleaned it out and hid it in my closet like it was proof. I don't have it anymore. We moved, and I tossed it, or maybe my mom found it and didn't understand. But I remember the color of it. Bright red. Cherry Coke. The smell of chemicals when I first opened it. The sting in my mouth. The way my fingers trembled when I set it down. I never walked alone after school again. Not even a block. And even now, as an adult, if I see an old blue sedan crawling down a street slowly, something clenches in my stomach. Christina moved away before middle school. Or maybe I did. I'm not sure. I never saw her again after 5th grade. I don't know what kind of person she grew up to be. I don't know if she ever felt guilty, or if she even remembers it. But I do, and I always will. I never knew my father. That fact used to sit quietly in the background of my life like a closed door in a house I grew up in. Always there, never opened. He died when I was 4 years old, along with my stepmother and my baby brother. They were on their way to pick me up for a few months, driving down Highway 84 in West Texas, somewhere between Lubbock and Abilene. I don't remember him at all. I don't remember the man who held half my DNA, who had planned to spend the summer with me. And yet, a part of me is tied to that highway like a weed caught in the cracks of old pavement. Growing up, my mom told me what happened in bits and pieces, usually when I asked. She didn't go out of her way to bring it up, and I learned not to either. It always made her quiet. The kind of quiet where words might only make things worse. All I really knew was that there had been a crash. A semi-truck. A parked car. The baby had been crying, and they pulled over on the shoulder to check on him. The semi-driver had been driving too long. Exhausted. Probably half asleep. He drifted off the main road, going downhill at about 70 miles an hour, and slammed right into the back of their car. There was nothing left. The car caught fire. The flames took everything. No one survived but the truck driver. That's what I was told, and it settled into my mind like a blurry picture, something I could vaguely understand, but never really grasp. I didn't even cry about it growing up, not really. You can't mourn someone you don't remember. Not properly. But the story always hung in my mind like a strange fact I didn't know what to do with. It was just part of my life. A page in the book I was born into, already turned before I could read it. Years went by. I grew up, graduated high school, and ended up attending Texas Tech in Lubbock. It wasn't planned, nothing poetic about it. I got in, they gave me some money, and it was far enough from home that it felt like a fresh start. The thing was, every time I drove to and from school, especially when I was heading to DFW to see friends or go home for a holiday, I had to take Highway 84. That same road, that same stretch of highway. At first, I didn't really think about it. I mean, there's nothing especially remarkable about Highway 84. Long stretches of nothing. Flat land. Fields that look the same mile after mile. Silos, old gas stations, maybe a rusted-out pickup truck leaning into the dust beside a barbed wire fence. The land feels endless out there. The sky feels too big. You start to feel like you're shrinking the longer you drive. Most people roll up their windows, turn up the music, and just push through. But the more I made the drive, the more I started to wonder. Where exactly had it happened? That crash. That one moment that split a family apart, that stole people I never had the chance to know. Somewhere along this road, just past these fence posts, that tragedy unfolded. And no one left alive knew the exact spot. Not my mom. Not any family that was still around. It felt like something that belonged to the wind now. So one night, when I was back in Lubbock and had nothing better to do, I decided to search for it. Just to see if I could find more. Maybe there had been an article written about it. Maybe someone had remembered. It was late when I started looking. I sat in my tiny college apartment with the sound of my neighbor's TV bleeding through the wall and opened up my laptop. I didn't even know what to type at first. Eventually I put in, Highway 84 accident Texas father-stepmother baby truck fire 1990s. It took a while. Most of the results were newer crashes. There were more of them than I expected. So many people pulled off to the shoulder, just trying to make a call, or check a flat tire, or deal with a crying child. But one article finally stood out. It was from some old regional newspaper archive that someone had uploaded onto a personal website. It was grainy and old and barely formatted right. But the details matched. A young family, a semi-truck, the fire, the death. The article mentioned that the truck driver survived, and it mentioned that a local had seen it happen. The witness lived in a house not far from the highway. Apparently, he was the one who called emergency services. He heard the crash and ran out. By the time he got there, the car was already engulfed. There wasn't anything he could do. But what stuck with me most, what froze me there in my desk chair, was that in the article, he said something else. He said that over the years, he sometimes saw the young family walking along the side of the highway. Not once or twice. Repeatedly. He didn't use poetic language. He didn't call them ghosts or spirits or anything like that. He said it like someone describing deer crossing the road. He said he saw a man, a woman, and a child walking along the shoulder, always moving east, always continuing their journey, but never getting any closer to where they were headed. I must have read that line 10 times. My throat tightened up. My jaw clenched. My hand hovered over the mouse, but didn't click away. They were on their way to pick me up. They were coming to get me. They never made it. But somehow they were still walking, still trying to get there. I can't explain the way that hit me. I didn't know them. I didn't remember my father. I had never even seen my baby brother alive. But the idea that they were still out there, walking that road, going east toward a destination they'd never reach, that broke something open inside me. I sat in that chair and cried like I hadn't cried in years. Not loud, just slow and steady. It was like mourning something I didn't know I'd lost until that moment. I printed the article, folded it carefully. I kept it in my glove box for months, taking it out sometimes and reading it again when I made that drive. Eventually, I decided I needed to find the spot. The exact spot, or at least as close to it as I could. I started by asking people. At gas stations, small stores, roadside diners. I didn't expect much, but to my surprise, a few people actually remembered. It was a big crash. Fires are rare out there. People don't forget when they see black smoke rising for miles over flat land. One old guy at a gas station near Sweetwater remembered hearing about it on the local radio back then. He told me to drive about 15 miles past a certain ranch fence with a sign that read 3 Oaks and look for a break in the shoulder rail. He said it was patched up now, but for a while you could still see black scorch marks on the pavement. So that's what I did. I drove out there alone one weekend. No music, no distractions, just the hum of the engine and the wind through the cracked window. I passed the 3 Oaks sign and started counting the miles. The sky was overcast, pale. It looked like the kind of day when the sun was trying to push through but gave up. I found the place. I didn't even need to check the odometer. I just felt it. There was a slight dip in the shoulder. The grass beyond it was a little thinner. The soil looked darker. A newer guardrail had been put in, and a small drainage ditch ran beside it. There were no signs. Nothing to say what had happened. Nothing to tell the story of what was lost there. But I knew. Somehow I just knew. I parked my car and stepped out. The wind hit me hard, dry and gritty. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, just listening to the wind rush through the grass. It was quiet out there. No cars passed for a while. Just me and the land. I didn't say anything. I just stood there and thought about them. About what that day must have been like. About how scared they might have been. About what they had planned. A road trip. Picking me up. Spending time together. Maybe they had a bag packed for me in the trunk. A car seat. Maybe snacks. I'll never know. I closed my eyes and pictured them. Not how they died, but how they might have looked. A father focused on the road. A young woman turned around in her seat, calming the baby. A baby crying because something didn't feel right. And then nothing. Just silence and flame. I stayed for about an hour. Didn't take any pictures. Didn't need to. It was burned into my mind now. I said a quiet goodbye, though I wasn't even sure who I was saying it to. Them? That version of my life that never happened? Myself? I don't know. When I got back in my car and started driving, I didn't look in the rearview mirror for a long time. I just kept my eyes forward, kept driving east, toward a place they were never able to reach, toward a life that had kept going even after theirs stopped. And here's the strangest part of all. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in spirits or haunted highways or signs from the beyond. But every time I drive past that spot now, I slow down. I glance to the shoulder. And sometimes, just for a second, I think I see movement. The shape of a man, a woman, a small child. Not clear, not sharp, just the suggestion of something still walking, still trying. It could be my imagination. It probably is. But whether or not they're out there doesn't change the truth. They never made it. I did. And part of me will always carry that weight. Not guilt, just a hollow kind of understanding. An empty space where people should have been. I don't go searching for answers anymore. I've read the article. I've stood on the roadside. I've felt the wind. There's nothing else to find. But I still think about them when I drive. I think about how quickly life can change. How a single moment can split a road into 2 paths. One where you go on, and one where everything stops. So I tell the people I care about that I love them. I try not to leave things unsaid. I never drive tired. And every once in a while, when I'm out on that highway, and the sun is setting just right, I look to the shoulder. Just in case they're still out there. Still walking. Still trying to get home. I was in my mid-20s, working a boring office job at a company I didn't really care about, but it paid the bills and gave me evenings free, so I couldn't complain too much. I lived in a small flat about a 30-minute walk from the office, and every day, unless it was pouring rain, I walked home through the local park. It wasn't anything fancy. Some patches of grass, a few trees here and there, a duck pond, and a couple of well-worn pathways running across it. But during the day, especially in summer, it was full of life. Families picnicking, old people feeding the ducks, teenagers smoking under the trees, joggers pounding the gravel paths, and people walking their dogs or just cutting through like I usually did. The park had a bit of a reputation at night. You'd hear stories. Muggings, fights, sketchy people hanging around the benches long after sunset. I always avoided it after dark. But during the day, it felt like a completely different place. Bright, open, filled with noise and activity. There were always enough people around to make it feel safe. I never thought twice about taking my usual shortcut through it. There was this small gate in the middle of the park. It wasn't the main entrance, just a little side gate that led out to a side street, which then connected to my neighborhood. It cut maybe 5 or 6 minutes off the walk, and I'd taken it almost every day for years. The path to the gate was lined with tall bushes and some overgrown shrubs. You couldn't see the gate from far off unless you were right on that path, but I knew it well enough not to worry. It felt like a routine, something I could do half asleep. This day was warm, sunny, one of those summer afternoons where everything seems slower. People were lying out on the grass, shirts off, soaking in the sun. There was a group of teenagers playing music off a speaker near the path. A woman threw a ball for her dog, who barked and chased it like his life depended on it. Everything looked normal, relaxed, harmless. As I walked, I had my headphones in, listening to a podcast. Some true crime episode, funny enough, about a girl who went missing on her way home from work. I remember the host describing how she was last seen walking alone down a road just a few blocks from her apartment. The details blurred a bit, but something about the tone of it made me pause the episode. I remember thinking, maybe I should switch to music, but I didn't. I just took the earbuds out and left them dangling around my neck, letting the quiet fill the space. I kept walking, turning onto the narrower path toward the gate. That's when I saw them. 2 guys, maybe late teens or early 20s, standing right by the gate. They were both wearing black hoodies, one with the hood up despite the heat, and the other with short cropped hair. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, sort of leaning against the gate. From far off, they didn't look threatening, just 2 young guys hanging out. But something in my gut shifted. I felt it right away. A tightness in my stomach. That strange little alarm bell that you try to ignore. I slowed down just slightly, not enough to be obvious. My brain started making excuses. Maybe they were just waiting for someone. Maybe they were having a smoke. Maybe I was just being paranoid. You always hear about people assuming the worst, and I didn't want to be one of those people. So I kept going, telling myself to stop being ridiculous. It was daylight after all. People were nearby. I wasn't alone. I just walked past, say excuse me if they didn't move, and be on my way. But as I got closer, maybe 20 feet away, one of the guys stepped away from the gate and drifted over toward the bushes on the left side of the path. It was subtle, like he was just moving to stretch his legs or something. But he didn't come out the other side. He crouched down, disappearing from my view completely. That's when the tightness in my stomach turned to something else, fear. Cold and real. The second guy suddenly turned and looked straight at me. He was smiling, but not in a friendly way. It was that forced, fake smile that doesn't reach the eyes. He raised his hand slightly, as if to get my attention, and then he shouted, "Hey, you got the time." I didn't answer. I didn't stop walking. My feet kept moving, but something inside me started screaming. That voice that had been whispering all along was now yelling. I looked past him for the first time and noticed the car. It was parked right next to the gate, just barely off the path, nose pointed toward the street. A gray sedan, kind of dirty, with tinted windows. I hadn't even seen it until then. It had blended into the background. But now that I was looking, I saw the door on the far side was open, just a crack, and crouched beside the car, behind the doors, were more people. I counted 2, maybe more, just low enough to not be visible unless you were really close. My feet faltered. I felt my throat tighten. It was a trap. In an instant, I turned around and started walking in the opposite direction. Not running, just walking fast, like I was late for something. I didn't want to panic or draw attention to myself. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The blood rushed to my head. I didn't look back. Then came the second shout. "Oi, "You, what's the time?" This one was louder, sharper. I didn't turn around. I just walked faster. My arms were stiff at my sides, and I could feel my legs wanting to break into a sprint. But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep walking. The path curved a little, and the bushes began to block my view of the gate. I passed by a couple with a stroller, and then a guy jogging with earbuds in. I wanted to stop and stand next to them, pretend like I was waiting for someone, or say something, but the words wouldn't come. My mouth was dry. I kept walking. I took the long way out of the park, all the way to the main road on the opposite end. It probably added 10 minutes to my walk. I didn't look behind me. I didn't want to know if they were following. But every sound, every footstep behind me, every car slowing down, made me jump. I walked fast, then faster, then finally broke into a jog once I was out of sight of the park, down a quiet side street. I must have looked crazy, sweating and panting, constantly glancing behind me. I kept telling myself that they hadn't followed, that I was safe now, that nothing happened. But my body didn't believe it. By the time I got to my street, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my key into the lock. I remember standing at the door, heart thudding, fumbling with the keys like I'd forgotten how to use them. When I finally got the door open, I slammed it shut and locked every bolt, double-checked every latch, then stood in the hallway trying to catch my breath. I didn't sit down right away. I just stood there, listening, half expecting someone to knock or try the door handle. But nothing happened. The street was quiet, nothing out of place. Eventually I went to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and sat on the couch, staring at the wall. My hands still trembled. My legs felt weak. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe an hour, maybe more. I replayed everything in my head over and over. Every step, every face, that voice, the crouched shapes behind the car, the look in the guy's eyes when he shouted the second time. I knew what that was. They weren't just hanging out. They weren't lost. That wasn't curiosity or friendliness. That was a setup. I don't know exactly what they had planned, but I know it wasn't good. Maybe they thought I'd come up to them, stop and check my phone, and they'd grab me. Maybe they'd pull me into the car. Maybe they'd follow me, wait until I was alone. I don't know, but I know it wasn't nothing. I never told the police. I thought about it, but what could I say? That a few guys were standing near a gate and asked me the time? That I felt something was wrong. No one had touched me. No one chased me. I didn't even have names or license plates or descriptions beyond young guys in hoodies. So I said nothing, but I never walked through that park again, not even during the day. I started taking the long route, even though it added time to my commute. It wasn't worth the shortcut anymore. That gate, once just a harmless detail in my day, now felt like a place I barely escaped from. For weeks afterward, I had nightmares. I'd see the gate in my dreams, hear that voice shouting behind me. I'd wake up covered in sweat, the sound of footsteps echoing in my ears. Every time I left work, I looked over my shoulder. I changed my routines, left at different times, took different routes. Eventually, the fear faded, slowly, like bruises under the skin. I stopped jumping at every sound. I stopped scanning crowds for familiar faces. But I never forgot the feeling in my stomach when I saw that guy crouch into the bushes. That cold certainty that something was wrong. People always think the worst dangers happen at night. That if it's sunny and crowded, you're safe. But that day taught me something different. You can be targeted in broad daylight, in a busy park, with people all around. And you don't need a weapon in your face to feel terror. Sometimes just the wrong glance, the wrong movement, the wrong voice at the wrong time is enough to tell you, you need to get out now. I didn't run that day, but I should have. Still, I got away. That's what matters. Nothing happened. But I know, deep down, I was one bad decision away from something that could have changed my life forever. When I was a kid, we lived in an apartment building that wasn't really bad, but it wasn't great either. It was one of those places where the walls were thin, the carpet in the hallway always smelled like dust and old soup, and the elevator never worked right. We were on the 3rd floor, and our apartment faced the back alley. So every night I'd fall asleep hearing stray cats fighting or people dragging out trash late at night. It wasn't scary to me at the time, it was just normal. That was life. My mom was the kind of person who always tried to be kind to people, even when she didn't have much to give. She worked 2 jobs and still found time to bake banana bread or brew tea for neighbors. She was tired most of the time, but she never let it stop her from smiling. One of the people she connected with in those early days of living there was the woman who lived directly below us on the 2nd floor. Her name was Denise. Denise was quiet. I hardly ever heard her voice through the floors, which was rare in that building. Most nights you could hear people fighting, watching TV too loud, or dragging furniture. But Denise, she was like a shadow. She lived alone, and I never saw anyone come or go from her place except for her. I didn't know much about her at first, only that she had short, messy hair and usually wore big sweaters, even in the summer. She had tired eyes, like she'd cried too many times and just didn't have any tears left. I remember the first time I actually noticed her was when she helped my mom carry groceries up the stairs. The elevator had broken again, surprise, surprise, and my mom had 2 bags in each hand, with one starting to rip at the bottom. Denise came out of nowhere and scooped up one of the bags without a word. She didn't smile, just nodded at my mom and walked up beside her. After that, my mom started inviting her up, just for coffee or tea, or sometimes just to sit in silence. I'd be doing homework or watching TV while they sat at the kitchen table talking about grown-up things. Most of it was boring to me, work, bills, family problems, but sometimes I'd hear things that stuck with me, like how Denise talked about someone named Carla. She didn't say a lot about her, but the way she said her name, soft and slow, told me everything. Carla had been important. Carla had been loved. But Carla wasn't around anymore. A few times I saw Denise crying, quietly, wiping her face with a napkin and turning her head so my mom wouldn't see, even though she probably did. I didn't ask questions, because kids just kind of pick up on when not to. I'd sneak away to my room or turn the volume up on the TV just enough so they could keep talking in peace. I didn't know what heartbreak looked like back then, but now when I think about Denise, I know that's what I was seeing. Weeks went by, maybe 3. We didn't see Denise. My mom knocked on her door a couple of times, left a note once. Nothing. No answer. At first, I didn't think much of it. Grown-ups had their own lives. People get busy. But one day, I remember this heavy silence, this weird stillness that sat in the apartment like a blanket. Even my mom seemed off. She stood by the kitchen window looking down at the back alley, like she was trying to see something that wasn't there. Then one morning, after breakfast, she told me we were going to check on Denise together. I asked her why now, and she said she had a bad feeling. Just that, a bad feeling. I didn't argue. We both got dressed and walked down the stairs. When we got to Denise's door, my mom knocked once, twice, then tried the knob. It was one of those slow, creaking turns you only see in movies. The door wasn't locked. It opened an inch, then 2, then fully swung open, like someone had left it like that for days. The hallway inside was dark, no lights on. There was a smell, heavy, wet, sour. Something like rotting food, but sharper. It hit me like a wall. I gagged without meaning to, and my mom held her arm out to stop me from going further. But we did go in. Her apartment was almost identical to ours in layout, but it felt colder. The furniture looked untouched. The coffee table had a ring from a cup that had long dried out. A plant near the window had withered to nothing. Everything was still. No sound of a fridge humming. No TV. No fan. Just this strange, awful silence. We walked slowly, step by step, the smell getting worse the deeper we went in. I kept looking over my shoulder, even though there was no one behind us. The bathroom door was slightly open, a sliver of shadow breaking through. My mom pushed it the rest of the way. That moment is burned into my brain. The bathtub was half full with what looked like muddy water, but it wasn't mud. It was blood, dark and clotted in places, smeared up the sides like someone had struggled. Denise was in there, slumped over, arms hanging loose, head tilted to one side. Her skin had gone this pale bluish gray. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. There was blood on her legs, her arms, her stomach. A razor blade was sitting on the floor next to the tub, half sunken in a pool of brown-red water. The smell was coming from her. I remember the way my body froze. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My brain just shut down. My mom grabbed me by the shoulders and turned me away, but it was too late. I'd already seen everything, every detail. I couldn't unsee it. We backed out slowly, my mom holding her hand over her mouth. I think she was trying not to throw up. Once we were in the hallway, she ran up the stairs with me and called the police from our apartment. They came quickly. First the regular cops, then detectives, then people in rubber gloves with cameras and bags. They asked us questions. Mostly my mom answered. I sat on the couch with a blanket over my shoulders, even though it wasn't cold. Everything felt unreal, like a bad dream you can't wake up from. Later, we found out what happened. Carla, her girlfriend, had left her. Just packed up and walked out one day, no warning. Denise had called in sick to work several times, stopped answering her phone, stopped paying bills. She'd been dead for at least a week before we found her. I had trouble sleeping after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face again. Not just the way she looked in the bathtub, but her face from before, alive, quiet, soft. I couldn't understand how someone who had sat at our table drinking tea could end up like that. How a person could hurt so quietly that nobody knew it was happening until it was too late. My mom tried to comfort me in her own way. She told me not to worry. She said Denise was our friend, and friends don't haunt friends. That was supposed to help, I guess. But it didn't. Not really. I knew there wouldn't be any ghosts or anything, but that wasn't what I was afraid of. I was afraid of how close everything had come to being missed forever. If we hadn't gone down there that day, how much longer would she have stayed there, rotting in silence? After the police cleared the apartment, they had someone come clean the place out. I saw them carry boxes out one afternoon, clothes, books, photos. I watched from our kitchen window, looking down at the men loading her life into the back of a truck. It all seemed so small, like everything that mattered had fit into 4 boxes. The apartment stayed empty for months. Nobody wanted to move in. Word spread fast in places like that, and no one wanted to live in the dead lady's apartment. Eventually, they painted over everything and replaced the carpet. Some guy moved in later that year. He played guitar and smoked on the balcony. I never spoke to him. Years went by. We moved out eventually, to a better place across town. But I never forgot Denise. Her face still pops up in my head sometimes, especially when I see someone sitting alone in a cafe or standing by themselves at the bus stop. People carry a lot of pain under the surface, and most of the time we never notice. We never ask. Now that I'm older, I think about how many people are out there like her. Quiet, lonely, sad in ways that don't show on the outside. It makes you wonder how many Denises are out there, walking around with heavy hearts, waiting for someone to care enough to knock on the door. I still don't believe in ghosts, not really. But there's something else that stays with you. A weight, a presence. Not in a haunted way, but in a real human way. The kind that lingers in your chest long after the memory fades from your mind. The kind that makes you look twice at people, wonder how close they are to the edge. Denise died alone, but at least someone found her. At least she wasn't forgotten in that place forever. That thought is the only thing that makes it all feel a little less cruel. And I guess, in a way, my mom was right. Denise hasn't haunted me in the way people think of ghosts. But the memory of her, the weight of it, that's something I still carry. I always will. I was outside playing with my friends one afternoon. It was warm out, and the sun was starting to drop lower in the sky, casting that kind of orange light that makes everything look softer. We were about 9 or 10 years old, all of us. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people left their front doors unlocked, and kids played until the streetlights came on. It was just a bunch of small houses spaced out along a long stretch of road, and behind most of them were fields or woods. The kind of place that felt safe just because it was small. That day, we were at my friend's house. His yard was wide and open, and we were running around with a ball, taking turns kicking it across the grass, making up rules as we went. There was a calm breeze blowing, and the trees lining the road rustled gently. You could hear birds in the distance, and the occasional bark of a dog. It felt like any other lazy day we'd had a dozen times before. We were sweaty, laughing, not really paying attention to anything beyond our game. That was when we noticed the truck. It wasn't the sound that caught our attention first. Cars went up and down that road from time to time, mostly neighbors or someone heading into town. But the way it moved, slow, way slower than it should have been for someone just passing through. It was an older truck, blue maybe, or dark green. It had those wide mirrors sticking out from the sides, and a little rust near the bottom edges of the doors. We watched it go by the first time without thinking much of it. Maybe someone lost or looking for a house. But then it came back. A few minutes passed and we saw it again, rolling past even slower this time. It didn't stop, just crawled by, the engine low and steady, like it was trying not to draw attention. But we were already watching. It passed the house again and kept going. This time we noticed the driver. He was alone. A man, probably in his 40s or 50s, with a short beard and wearing a cap. He didn't look at us directly. Not that time anyway. But there was something about the way his head stayed level, pointed toward the yard, that made us all stop playing. We stood still for a minute after he passed. One of my friends said it was weird. Another shrugged it off. Maybe he was just lost, looking for a turn. We went back to kicking the ball around, but something had shifted. I was glancing up at the road every few seconds, even when it wasn't my turn. The third time he came by, we all saw it clearly. He had something in his hand. One of those old camcorder-style recorders, the kind you held up on your shoulder or supported with both hands. It was definitely pointed at us. He wasn't even pretending to hide it now. He had slowed down even more, and his window was open. The camera was resting on the door, angled right at the yard. Right at us. That time, he did look. Right at us. Not just a glance, he stared. That's when everything in me turned cold. It's a hard thing to describe, that feeling. It wasn't panic, not yet. But it was like a knot tightening in your stomach, something in your body, knowing something was wrong before your brain had fully caught up. It was a warning. Every hair on my arm stood up. The moment he passed the house and disappeared down the road again, we ran. We dropped the ball and sprinted to the front door, not even talking to each other. We didn't have to. We all knew. Inside, we found my friend's mom and told her everything. She got serious real quick and told my friends they had to stay inside. Then she looked at me and said I should go home. I remember blinking at her, confused. I tried to explain that my mom wasn't home, that she had gone into town, and I didn't know when she'd be back. But she just said it was best if I headed home now. Maybe she thought I was exaggerating. Maybe she didn't want to deal with someone else's kid. Or maybe she thought it wasn't that serious and I'd be fine. Either way, she opened the door, told me to head out, and closed it behind me. I stood on the porch for a second, stunned. The sky was still orange, but now it looked harsh. The same breeze that felt nice earlier now made me feel exposed. I turned toward the road and started walking. It was about 1.5 miles to my house. Not that far if you're in a car, but on foot, especially at 10 years old, it felt like forever. The road wasn't completely empty, but it was quiet. Most houses were set far back from the street with long driveways and tall fences or trees blocking the view. There were no sidewalks, just a narrow strip of grass on each side, and then ditches. There were no kids out, no people watering lawns, no one walking their dogs. It was just me. I started walking fast, looking over my shoulder every few steps. I kept hearing sounds I wasn't sure were real, the crunch of tires on gravel, the hum of an engine, something rustling in the trees. I kept turning around, expecting to see that truck rolling slowly behind me, creeping up without a sound. But it wasn't there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I knew he could be nearby. Maybe he had parked somewhere. Maybe he had turned around and was watching from the woods. Maybe he was waiting for me to be out in the open, alone. Every driveway I passed felt like a threat. Every tree line looked like a hiding spot. I started running. I ran hard. My backpack bounced against me, and my breath came fast and shallow. I didn't pace myself. I didn't look back anymore. I just ran. The wind in my ears, the pounding of my shoes on the pavement, the way my chest started to hurt, I didn't care. I just needed to get home. Every part of the road looked the same after a while. Just the long stretch of cracked pavement, the dull sound of my steps, the pounding in my head. I passed a field on one side and a tall wooden fence on the other, and for a second, I thought I saw a movement in the corner of my eye. A shape, maybe. Something darker than the shadows. I didn't stop to check. I was wheezing by the time my house came into view. My legs felt rubbery, and I was drenched in sweat, but I didn't stop. I ran straight up the driveway, yanked open the front door, and slammed it behind me. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful. Just still. I locked the door, then locked it again. I ran to the windows and pulled the curtains shut. Then I stood there for a while, just listening. Nothing. No truck, no tires, no sounds at all. I finally moved to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, spilling half of it because my hands were shaking so bad. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to catch my breath. My heart was still racing. My mouth was dry. I kept glancing at the window, waiting to see that man's face there, or the camera lens peeking through the blinds. but it didn't happen. Eventually, my mom came home. When she saw me, sweaty and pale, and I told her what had happened, she got furious. Not at me, at my friend's mom for making me walk home alone. She kept repeating that I should have been allowed to stay until she got back, that it was irresponsible. She made some calls, talked to neighbors, and reported what happened. Later, other people in the neighborhood said they saw the same truck. Some said it had been parked near the park earlier in the week. Someone else mentioned seeing it at the school playground on a Sunday. No one ever got a plate number. The truck never came back, at least not that anyone noticed. The man was never caught, and we never found out who he was or what he wanted. Maybe he was just filming random kids. Maybe it was worse. After that, things changed. My mom didn't let me walk home alone anymore, no matter how short the distance. My friend's parents started paying more attention, asking more questions, and watching the street when we were outside. We didn't play in the front yard anymore, just the back, with the gate closed. If a car slowed down even a little, everyone froze and stared until it was gone. I never really stopped looking over my shoulder. That one day did something to me. It made me aware of how quickly things can go from normal to dangerous. How fast your heart can go from calm to pounding in your throat. How even in a quiet, peaceful place, someone can be watching, waiting. I never saw that truck again, but sometimes, even now, I catch myself glancing at parked cars when I walk by. I listen for engines idling. I notice when someone's eyes linger too long. I can still feel the heat of that afternoon, the roughness of the pavement under my shoes as I ran, the dread that filled my chest with every step I took alone down that road. And I still think about how close that man was. How easy it would have been for him to stop the truck, open the door, and pull up beside me. No one would have seen. No one would have heard. Just a mile and a half of road with nothing but trees and empty driveways. And I still can't believe she made me walk home. When I was around 8 years old, I had a habit of wandering a little too far from the group during recess. Not in a troublemaking way, just curious. I liked to look at things a bit closer than others did. A tree stump could hold my attention for 10 minutes. A crack in the sidewalk could be a treasure map in my head. I was always the last one to line up when the bell rang, always the one who hadn't noticed it was time to go back inside. I liked quiet things. I liked moments where no one else was looking. But that day was different. That day there was noise, panic, a cluster of kids near the edge of the blacktop, close to a part of the building we weren't supposed to mess around with. It was the storage room. Teachers always said to stay away from it. Not in a dramatic way, just that it was off limits. I never had any reason to go near it before. It was just a gray metal door near the side of the gym, with a rusted handle and one of those old circular keyholes you don't see much anymore. No windows, no signs, just a dead-end space that didn't concern us. But that morning, something was going on. A bunch of kids had gathered in a half circle a few feet from the door. Some were whispering, some yelling. One of the boys was waving his arms, warning others not to get too close. I couldn't hear everything from where I was, but the words eyeball and staring caught my attention like a hook. I walked up, weaving through the crowd slowly, curious more than anything else. The kids weren't faking it. Their faces were pale. A couple looked like they wanted to cry. One of the older girls was pulling on her friend's sleeve, urging her to stay away. I remember the look on her face. She wasn't pretending. You could tell. Her eyes were locked on the keyhole like it had teeth. I asked what was going on, but no one answered me. Maybe they didn't hear me. Maybe they didn't want to talk. Or maybe they were just too freaked out. I heard someone say it again. There's an eyeball in the keyhole. At first I thought they meant someone was inside. Maybe a teacher or someone playing a prank. But their reactions didn't match that kind of joke. These were kids who were genuinely afraid. They weren't laughing. They weren't daring each other to look. They were warning, telling each other to stay back, like something might reach through the door and pull them in. I kept moving forward until I was just a few steps away from the door. There was a half circle of kids behind me, leaving a gap around the front like an invisible fence. No one wanted to be the one closest to it, except me. I was too young to fully understand the fear, I guess. Or maybe I just didn't believe it. I stood there for a second, looking at the keyhole. It was small, round, with little bits of chipped paint around the edge. The metal was scratched and slightly rusted, probably from years of keys turning inside it. There was nothing strange about the door itself. No sounds, no movement. Just an ordinary storage room. I bent down slowly, pressing one hand against the door for balance. I remember the coldness of it, how the metal felt against my fingers. My head tilted slightly to get the right angle on the keyhole, and I closed one eye to focus with the other. And that's when I saw it. An eye, wide open, unmoving, staring right back at me. Dead center in the hole. It wasn't blurry or shadowed. It was sharp, detailed. I could see the whites of it, the faint red lines of blood vessels. The iris was brown, just like mine. The pupil was large, almost too large. There was no blinking, no twitch, just this steady, cold gaze staring directly back into my eye. I froze. My entire body turned rigid, like I had been snapped into place. I couldn't even gasp. I couldn't scream. My body reacted before my mind did. My stomach twisted. My legs trembled. And then it happened. I lost control. I peed right there, standing in front of everyone. Warmth spread down my legs, pooling in my socks and shoes. It didn't even register right away. I was still locked into that stare. And then I screamed. Finally. Loud. Sharp. Like an alarm going off in a room full of silence. I backed away, almost tripping over myself, falling into the kids behind me. That was when the panic spread. The group broke apart. Some kids ran. Others stood frozen. I was crying. Loud, ugly sobs. The fear had completely taken over. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was pure terror. My body had shut down from the inside. A few teachers came running over after that. They didn't understand what was going on, just that a bunch of kids were screaming, and one of them had clearly had an accident. They tried calming us down, but most of us couldn't speak. I remember sitting on a bench near the edge of the blacktop, wrapped in a spare sweater one of the staff gave me. I was still shaking. I kept looking at the door like it was alive. Eventually, I was sent to the nurse's office. She cleaned me up, gave me a spare pair of pants that didn't fit right, and told me to rest on the cot for a while. I didn't talk much. I was still trying to make sense of what I had seen. I kept replaying it in my mind. How close the eye had been, how still it was. I kept thinking, what if it was still there, watching? Later in the day, once things had calmed down, the janitor was called in to investigate the storage room. I wasn't there to see it, but I overheard a teacher talking about it when I was waiting in the office. Apparently, he unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stood there for a minute before laughing. Not a mean laugh, just one of surprise. He found a mirror. A tall, full-length mirror leaning against the inside of the door, angled perfectly toward the keyhole. What we had all seen, the terrifying, unmoving eye, was our own reflection. Our own eye staring back at us. That was it. That was the answer. Simple. Logical. A trick of light and reflection. But it didn't matter. Not really. Because the fear we felt had been real. The panic, the shock, the raw sense that something was wrong. That didn't go away just because there was an explanation. Our bodies reacted before our minds could make sense of anything. I sat in that nurse's office for another hour after I heard what the janitor found. I didn't feel better. In some ways, I felt worse. How could something so simple scare us that much? How could our own reflection feel like a monster? I remember lying on the cot, staring at the ceiling tiles, wondering how many other things in life would turn out like that. How many things would terrify me, only to turn out to be nothing at all. It stuck with me, that whole experience. Not just the fear, but the way it spread. How quickly one kid's panic infected all the others. How none of us questioned it, we just believed. Because fear doesn't wait for facts. It doesn't need proof. It just needs a seed. A tiny suggestion that something is wrong, and our minds do the rest. For days after, I avoided that part of the building. Even knowing it was a mirror, I couldn't bring myself to go near it. Every time I thought about that I felt my chest tighten, like it was happening all over again. My mom washed the clothes I had peed in and never said a word. I think she understood, or at least sensed it wasn't something to tease about. But I heard other kids whispering. Not right away, but in the weeks after. Some laughed about it, turned it into a story to tell during lunch. Remember the eyeball, they'd say. Remember how he peed his pants? I hated hearing it, but I never argued, because they had seen it too. Maybe they hadn't reacted like I did, but they had felt that same fear, even if just for a second. We all did. That's the part one remember most clearly. Not the embarrassment, not the cleanup, not even the mirror, but the instant silence when I saw that eye. The weight of it, the way time stopped. Looking back, I know how silly it sounds. An eye in a keyhole. A bunch of scared kids. A janitor finding a mirror. But it didn't feel silly at the time. It felt real. It was real. That's what fear does. It makes everything feel heavier, bigger, closer. I learned something that day, even if I didn't fully understand it until much later. I learned how powerful the mind is, how it can take a reflection and turn it into a monster, how it can take a quiet moment and turn it into chaos. I learned that fear doesn't always come from the things we can see. It often comes from the things we think we see. And even now, all these years later, I still hesitate a little when I see a keyhole. Not because I expect to see something staring back at me, but because I remember that moment. That frozen second where I was sure something was watching. And I remember how helpless I felt, how small. Because even when the fear is gone, the memory of it lingers. Quiet, like a shadow, waiting. Back when I was in 3rd grade, I didn't really understand what it meant when adults said something felt off. I didn't have that instinct developed yet, or maybe I did, but didn't know how to listen to it. Kids are like that. They notice things, they feel things, but they don't always know how to explain them. They go by what feels good or bad in the moment, and I guess that's what made me such an easy target. Mrs. Todd was short. That's one of the first things I remember about her. Not just a little short, noticeably short. Like, even as a kid, I remember thinking how tiny she seemed. She had this wiry frame, thin arms that seemed too long for her body, like she should have been taller, but then her shoulders sloped down, and it made her look like she was always leaning forward. Her voice, though, was soft, high-pitched but smooth, kind of sing-songy. The first week of school, she immediately singled me out in the best way possible. At least, that's how I saw it. Every time there was something fun to do, like passing out supplies or reading a story aloud, she picked me. She always gave me the best markers, the clean scissors, the job of feeding the class fish. And when I did even the smallest thing right, like putting my books away neatly or finishing a worksheet, she would make a big show of complimenting me in front of everyone. And I ate it up. I didn't get that kind of attention at home. My parents weren't cruel or anything, just busy. My mom worked nights as a nurse, and my dad was a mechanic who often stayed late at the shop. I had 2 older brothers who were always off with their own friends, and no one really had time to make a 3rd grade kid feel like they were the center of the universe. But Mrs. Todd did. She called me her little star. She said it so often that other kids started teasing me for it. But I didn't care. I liked it. I felt seen, special. I remember coming home and telling my mom all about her. How great she was. How I wanted to be in her class forever. I even drew a picture of her once, with me standing next to her, both of us smiling, and gave it to her one morning before class started. She put it up on the board and said it made her heart melt. Looking back now, that moment sits in my memory like a bruise. The weird part started maybe a month into the school year. I sat at one of those old metal and wood desks with the lift-up lid, but ours had the pull-out drawer too. That morning, I came in like normal, sat down, pulled out the drawer to put in a pencil or something, and there it was, a Victoria's Secret catalog. At the time, I didn't really know what it was, just that it was full of pictures of women in underwear. That was enough to make me panic. I thought it was something dirty, something bad, and I instantly looked around like I'd been caught stealing. I was so scared I'd get in trouble. The kid sitting next to me, Evan, leaned over and saw what I was staring at. He let out this quiet laugh and said something like, "Whoa," and that made it worse. It wasn't even mine. I hadn't put it there, but I felt guilty anyway. Then Mrs. Todd came up. She must have seen us looking at something, because her voice came sharp. I remember how fast my heart started beating. She asked what I had, and I told her it was just sitting in my desk when I got there. I expected her to believe me. She always believed me, but she didn't. Instead, she turned to Evan and started saying things like, "You must have put it there. That's what happened, right?" She said it again and again, not yelling but repeating it in that same tone over and over. Evan looked confused too, but eventually I got so uncomfortable that I said, "I guess maybe he did," just to end it. I still remember Evan glancing at me after that, like I'd betrayed him. Maybe I had. I don't know. I was scared. Mrs. Todd never brought it up again, and neither did Evan. We just moved on. A few days later, she pulled me aside after class. Everyone else had already left. She knelt down to my level and told me I was doing so well in class, better than anyone else. and that she had something special in mind for me. She said if I kept it up, she'd take me on a field trip. Not a regular class field trip, but something just for me and her. She said it would be a weekend trip to the Gulf of Mexico. We'd see dolphins, collect seashells, go out on a boat. I was thrilled. To a third grader, that sounded magical. My family didn't take vacations. The idea of going to the beach, just me and my favorite teacher, seemed like the best thing that could ever happen. I didn't even question it. She told me not to tell anyone else, said it was a surprise, and she didn't want the other kids getting jealous. I didn't say a word. Then one day, maybe a week after that, she was just gone. No warning, no announcement. I walked into class, and there was a substitute. The next day, we had a new teacher entirely, Ms. Dawson. She was older, strict, and didn't like me much. At least, not the way Mrs. Todd had. I was crushed. I kept waiting for Mrs. Todd to come back. I even asked my mom about it, and she just said that sometimes teachers leave, and the school doesn't explain why. The field trip never happened. At the time, I didn't think too hard about it. I was just sad. I didn't know what disappointment like that meant, not in the bigger picture. I just missed my teacher. It wasn't until years later that I realized how strange, how wrong, all of it was. I was maybe 17 when the memory came back hard. I don't know what triggered it. I think I was watching some documentary about child abuse in schools, and they were talking about grooming. That word stuck with me. The signs they described, the favoritism, the secret gifts, the isolating of the child, the encouragement to keep things private, it hit me like a truck. I sat there in silence for a long time. I remembered that catalog. I remembered how she kept insisting Evan put it there, even when it didn't make sense. I remembered her offering to take me on a weekend trip, out of state, just the two of us, and how she made it sound so fun, so innocent. And I remembered how she vanished overnight. Back then, no one talked to us kids about that kind of danger. We had those weird assemblies where they told us not to talk to strangers or accept candy from people in vans. But they never told us that sometimes the danger didn't come from the people outside. Sometimes it was from the ones smiling at us every day, the ones we trusted. I thought about what would have happened if she hadn't left, if someone hadn't intervened. Maybe another teacher noticed something. Maybe a parent complained. Maybe Evan said something to his mom. Maybe someone saved me, and I'll never know who. And I think about that a lot, because for a long time, I thought of her as the kindest, most wonderful adult in my life. Someone I loved, someone I wanted to make proud. But the truth is, I think she was trying to hurt me. Not in a way I would have recognized then, but now it's so clear. She was planning something. That trip was real in her mind. She was setting something in motion, and I was the one she picked. I can't explain how sick that realization makes me feel, how close I came to something terrible, without even knowing I was in danger. Now that I'm older, I understand how many stories like mine are out there. How many kids never get that lucky break, that sudden removal, that unexplained replacement? How many kids end up going on that field trip? And I hate that it still makes me feel guilty, like I should have known better, like I did something wrong. But I was a kid. She was the adult. And no matter how small she was, no matter how sweet she acted, she had all the power. That's what makes it so scary. Not that she did something, but how close she came, how well she hit it, how easy it was, and how much I loved her for it. I was 11 years old. Just a normal night, or at least it started that way. I went to bed like I always did, curled up under my blanket with the little fan humming on the nightstand beside me. The room was dark, except for a faint bit of light coming in through the hallway. My door was always cracked a little, so I wouldn't feel completely shut in. I liked having that tiny glow from the hallway nightlight. It made the house feel alive, like my mom wasn't too far off. Safe. I remember lying there, half awake, listening to the creaks of the house settle. I could hear the refrigerator humming faintly, a car passing by every so often out on the road beyond our driveway. It was quiet otherwise. Nothing strange. Nothing that told me anything was going to happen. I closed my eyes and eventually drifted off, thinking about whatever random things kids think about before they sleep. It was late. Must have been past midnight when it happened. I woke up all of a sudden. I didn't know why at first. It wasn't a noise, not something outside. It was more like my body sensed something. That heavy, suffocating feeling of someone watching you. My eyes opened, confused at first, blinking slowly. It was dark. Too dark. The hallway light wasn't glowing anymore. That faint comfort I always had, gone. Just pitch black. Before I could even move or really understand what was going on, I felt it. Weight. A heavy pressure on my chest and stomach. Something, or someone was on top of me. At first I thought I was dreaming. Sleep paralysis, maybe. I'd heard of that. But no, this wasn't that. This was real. I could feel the pressure, the heat of breath. Then I felt his hand. A big hand. It was rough and dry and strong. It clamped down hard over my mouth and my nose all at once, pushing down so tight I couldn't breathe. It was like suddenly being thrown underwater without warning. My chest jerked up, and I couldn't get any air in. The panic hit me all at once. Sharp and cold. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My hands shot up and grabbed his wrist, but he was too strong. I started thrashing under him, kicking my legs, trying to twist my body. He didn't say anything at first, just pressed harder. Then, in a low, shaking voice, he told me to roll over. Don't scream. That's all he said. Roll over. Don't scream. He didn't yell it. He didn't sound angry or even loud. It was almost calm, but something in the way he said it made my stomach turn. I was frozen. My head was spinning, and my lungs were burning from the lack of air. My body wasn't listening to me. It was like every nerve had shut down. But I rolled. I did what he said. I rolled hard to my side, and my body hit the floor with a thud. That small moment, falling off the bed, was enough to jolt me back. Like it snapped me out of that frozen, terrified state. I gasped, pulling in a sharp breath. And that's when I tried to scream. Nothing came out. At first, my throat just opened and nothing happened. My mouth was wide, but it was like my brain hadn't caught up with the rest of me. Just air. Silent, panicked air. Then it hit me all at once. My voice came crashing out, loud and raw and broken. I screamed over and over. I screamed like I never had before in my life. Screamed so loud I thought my throat would tear open. My mom heard me. I don't even remember the exact moment she came into the room. Everything happened so fast. The man, whoever he was, had gotten off the bed and was moving toward the window. That's when she charged in. My mom is 5'3", maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, but I swear in that moment she looked like a giant. She didn't hesitate. No questions, no fear. She came in swinging. There was a blur of movement. I remember the sound of something hitting the wall, the scuffling of feet on the hardwood floor. She grabbed at him, tried to pull him back. He shoved her. She stumbled, but didn't go down. She grabbed him again, screaming, fighting. Her voice was sharp, fierce, filled with pure adrenaline. She clawed and pulled at his clothes, anything to stop him. But he was big, at least 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, strong. I remember his shape more than his face. He was wearing dark clothes, something like a hoodie and gloves. That's what still sticks with me. He was wearing gloves. Not like a burglar with tools, more like he didn't want to leave fingerprints. He didn't hit her. I don't know why. Maybe he didn't expect her to fight. Maybe he thought the noise would bring more people. Maybe he realized this wasn't going to be easy. But eventually he pulled away from her grip and dove out the window. Just like that, he was gone. Into the night. The window had been closed before I went to bed. Locked. We always locked everything. We had a single-story house, and we lived in a quiet neighborhood, so break-ins weren't really a fear. But that night, he had gotten in. We never did figure out how. The screen was removed, set neatly against the outside wall. The window latch had been pried open, not broken, just jimmied carefully so it looked untouched. Police came. They searched the house, the yard, the neighborhood. Nothing. No one had seen anything. No fingerprints. No shoe prints. No clues. Just a child's bedroom turned upside down, the curtains fluttering in the breeze, and my mom's trembling hands trying to clean up the shattered feeling in her own home. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Neither did she. We sat together in the living room, the lights all on, the door locked and double-locked. I sat on the couch, curled up, knees to my chest, just shaking. I wasn't cold, but I couldn't stop shivering. I felt like my skin wasn't mine anymore, like I was floating somewhere outside of my own head. My mom tried to stay calm, tried to keep it together, but I could tell she was just as scared as me. Maybe more. She didn't cry, though. Not once. She just stayed right beside me, one arm wrapped around me, eyes fixed on the door like she could fight off the whole world if she had to. The cops took a statement. I told them everything I remembered. The weight, the hand, the voice. Rolling off the bed. The window. I even tried to describe his clothes, his size, his smell. He smelled like sweat and something sour, like old shoes or trash left in the sun. That detail stuck with me for weeks. They asked around the neighborhood, put out alerts. We never heard anything back. No one else had been broken into. No other kids reported anything. For all we knew, it was a one-time thing. Someone passing through. Someone who had seen an opportunity. But the damage was done. After that night, I couldn't sleep in my room. Not for months. I slept on the couch, then in my mom's room, then eventually in the hallway just outside her door. Anywhere I could still see her. Anywhere I felt like I could scream, and she'd be there before anything happened again. We got an alarm system. New locks. Motion lights. Bars on the windows. Everything you could think of. But no matter how many things we installed, nothing made me feel the way I used to. Safe. Normal. Untouched. The nightmares came. Every night at first. Then every few days. Then just when I least expected them. Always the same, waking up, unable to breathe, someone heavy on my chest, darkness so thick it swallowed me whole. Sometimes in the dream, I couldn't scream at all. Sometimes I screamed, but no one came. And I'd wake up, heart racing, drenched in sweat, staring at the ceiling wondering if he was still out there. We moved a year later. It wasn't just because of that, but I know it played a part. My mom said it would help. A new house. A new start. I think she needed it just as much as I did. She never said it, but I could see the way she looked at the windows at night. She never left them cracked open again. Not even in summer. I never saw the man again. Never heard a name. Never got closure. But sometimes I still think about him. What he was doing there. Why he picked our house. Why he didn't do worse. Why he ran. I think he thought I was alone. Maybe he didn't think anyone would hear. Maybe he thought I'd be too scared to scream. And he was almost right. Almost. But my mom was there. And she fought. And I found my voice. We weren't broken, even if we were changed. And that night, whatever he came for, he didn't get it. He left with nothing. Not even his silence. Because we took that from him, too. We screamed. And the whole world heard. Probably just my entire life would count as a disturbing, scary story. It didn't start with anything big, nothing people would point to and say, "That's abuse." It was quieter than that, slower, like a fog that crept in over the years and smothered everything. When I was little, my mom and grandma kept a close eye on me. At first, it seemed normal, overprotective, maybe, but a lot of people have moms like that. I wasn't allowed to walk to school or ride my bike to the corner store like the other kids. I couldn't go play outside by myself, even though I saw other kids running around and getting dirty. I couldn't have friends over either, and I was never allowed to go to their houses. It always had to be just us. Just family. That was the line. They told me the world was dangerous, that people were evil, that accidents happen when you think you're safe. My mom said it with a kind of desperation that made me feel like she believed it. And my grandma backed her up, always. I remember once, I asked if I could go to a sleepover at a girl's house from school. I didn't even finish the question. My mom looked at me like I had betrayed her. Her voice dropped low, and she said I should be ashamed of myself, that I didn't appreciate how much she was doing to keep me safe. That was the first time I realized I wasn't just being protected. I was being owned. When you grow up like that, you don't always know it's wrong. You think maybe other kids have it too easy. You start to believe that you really are safer inside, that you really don't need friends, that everything you need is right there in that house with those two women. They repeat it enough times, and it sinks into your bones. It got worse as I got older. Way worse. I wasn't allowed to cook on the stove. Not even something simple like ramen or eggs. My mom said I could burn the house down. I wasn't allowed to drive, even after I got my permit. She said it was too dangerous. I didn't have a job. She wouldn't let me work. She said I didn't need money because I had her, that everything I needed was there. But it wasn't. I didn't have freedom. I didn't have a future. I didn't even have privacy. She would go through my things when I left the room. I know because once I came back and the books on my shelf were rearranged, not how I left them. She checked my drawers. She read my notebooks. She even checked the trash. If she found a scrap of paper with anything personal, she would bring it to me and demand an explanation. I started hiding money. Coins at first, from doing laundry. A few bucks here and there from pockets or under the couch cushions. I kept it hidden in a sock stuffed into a shoe box that I buried under my bed. I would wait until everyone was asleep and go check it sometimes, just to make sure it was still there. It became a kind of obsession, my only way out. I felt like I was robbing a bank, like I was stealing my own future back, $1 at a time. When I was 19, I finally decided I couldn't do it anymore. I had saved about $75. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get a cheap bus ticket and maybe a few snacks. I packed a backpack, just the basics. I figured I'd figure the rest out once I was gone. I didn't make it past the front yard. She tackled me. I heard the door swing open behind me, and then she was on me like a wild animal, screaming, nails digging into my arms, her knee in my back, my face pressed into the dirt. Then I saw my grandma's slippers. She came outside and helped drag me back in. They locked the doors and took my backpack. My mom ripped it open and threw everything across the floor. She found the money and took it. She said it belonged to her, that everything in that house was hers. She said I had betrayed her. That night, she slept beside my bed, not on the floor either. She pulled a chair right next to the bed and sat there, watching me. The lights were off, but I could see her shadow. Every time I moved, I heard her shift too. I didn't sleep at all. She took my phone, reported it stolen so I couldn't reactivate it. I couldn't make calls, couldn't contact anyone. She made sure of that. She started going through my room even more, checking everything. I think she was afraid I had another stash of money somewhere. Then she took me to church. It wasn't the regular church we used to go to. This one was different. Holiness, she called it. They had loud music and people shouting. They made a big deal about demons and sin. That day, she told the pastor I was possessed, that I was rebellious, that I had tried to run away. They held me in the middle of the floor and prayed over me for 3 hours straight. My mom cried and shouted, telling them to get the darkness out of me. The pastor kept his hand on my head the whole time, pressing so hard it hurt. I don't even remember what they said most of the time, just noise and heat and humiliation. I was shaking by the end of it. They said I was free now, healed, that I would see the truth. But I didn't. I saw a cage. Weeks later, I got another chance. I found a few dollars in Grandma's sewing kit and sold an old bracelet I had managed to hide. I bought a cheap bus ticket again. I didn't tell anyone. I waited for the right time. My cousin showed up at the house that day. She said she wanted to take me for ice cream. Said she missed me. Said she wanted to talk. I believed her. I got in the car, and as soon as the door shut, I heard the locks click. Child safety. I couldn't open it. She didn't even look at me. Just drove. I realized where we were going when we turned onto our street. My mom was standing on the porch when we pulled up, smiling like nothing had happened. They took me inside and locked the door again. That time, they didn't let me go anywhere. Not even in the yard. They took my shoes, my bags, anything that might help me escape. They turned the TV up loud, so I couldn't hear what was going on outside. For an entire year, I was a ghost in that house. I stopped talking much. I didn't eat unless they gave me food. I just sat, waited, watched the days go by. Some of my relatives started parking in the driveway randomly. I think they thought I might run again, so they blocked me in. They made it impossible for me to even try. I had no phone, no ID, no cash, no shoes. I had no proof I even existed outside of that house. But I watched. I waited. I listened. I knew I had to find a real way out, not just a desperate run. I started memorizing the phone numbers of local shelters when they came on commercials. I watched where they put the keys. I listened to their schedules when they went to sleep, when they went to church, when they took naps. I played the part. I smiled when they wanted me to. I said thank you. I told them I was sorry. I said I saw the truth now. I made them think I had given up. One night, my grandma fell asleep on the couch while watching her shows. My mom was upstairs taking a bath. I walked into the kitchen, took the spare house key from under the sink, and walked right out the front door. I didn't run. I walked. I walked 5 miles to a gas station that I remembered seeing once years ago. It took almost 2 hours. I didn't have shoes, so my feet were bleeding by the time I got there. I asked to use the phone. The clerk hesitated, but let me. I called the number I had memorized, a women's shelter hotline, told them my name, told them what happened, told them I didn't have ID or shoes or anything. They came and got me. That was 2 years ago. It took almost a year to get my documents back. Birth certificate, social security card. I had to file reports and statements. I had to talk to police and counselors and lawyers. My mom told them I was mentally unstable, that I had always been that way, that she was only protecting me. She even said I was a danger to myself. But they didn't believe her. They saw through it. They talked to doctors. They saw the patterns. They recognized the signs. Now I have a job. I have an apartment. I have shoes. Sometimes, I still wake up at night thinking she's sitting beside my bed, watching me. I check the closet. I check the door. I turn on the lights just to be sure. But I'm okay. I'm here. I'm alive. And I'm free. For a long time, I thought my life wasn't mine, that I belonged to her, that I would never leave. But I did. It took everything I had, and more than I thought I could give, but I made it out. No ghosts. No monsters. Just people. People who think they own you. And the long, slow fight to prove them wrong. It still scares me to think how close I was to disappearing in that house forever. But now, when I walk down the street with the sun on my face, and no one telling me what to do, I know I made it. I know I won. I was sitting in front of my computer, eyes half glued to the screen, clicking through tabs, trying to focus on the last bit of work I needed to finish. It was late, really late. I didn't even want to look at the clock, because I already knew it had slipped past midnight, maybe even 2 or 3 a.m. I'd been doing this for a few nights now, staying up way too late, grinding through documents and emails. The glow of the monitor was the only light in the room, casting a pale bluish hue across the desk and my hands. The house around me was silent. That heavy kind of silence you only really notice when everyone else is asleep and the world seems to shrink down to the size of your own breathing. I was staying with family for a few weeks, just visiting. I came every year around this time, same house, same room, same everything. It was one of those places where the walls haven't changed in decades. The same pictures hang in the hallway, the same rug in the living room, the same slightly warped bathroom door that creaks no matter how gently you try to open it. I knew the layout of the place like the back of my hand, especially the route from my room to the bathroom. I'd done it half asleep, eyes closed, even once during a blackout when I was a teenager. The path was simple. Out the bedroom door, take a few steps forward, then a left, a few more steps, another left, then straight down the hall to the bathroom. I didn't need lights. I could feel my way by instinct. I reached a point where my eyes started to blur from the screen, and my stomach was making subtle warnings that I'd drunk too much water earlier. I needed to pee. I pulled my headphones off, placed them on the desk, stood up slowly, and cracked my back. The room was dim except for the computer light, and as soon as I opened the door, I was swallowed in almost complete darkness. No night lights, no street lights sneaking through the windows, just a thick blanket of black. I stepped out into the hallway, careful to close the door quietly behind me. The sound of the latch clicking felt loud in the silence, so I took my time, easing it shut with the tips of my fingers. Then I started walking. I didn't reach for a light. I never do. I didn't want to risk waking anyone. Plus, I didn't need it. I walked forward a few steps, then turned left. The air in the hallway was cool and still, and the carpet under my bare feet felt just familiar enough to reassure me that I was on track. I made the second left without thinking, my shoulder grazing the wall just a little. The light in the bathroom spilled out as I clicked it on, the sudden brightness making me squint. I did what I needed to do, turned the light back off, and stepped back out into the dark. There was that moment where my eyes were completely shot. After being in the light for a few minutes, I was blind again in the hallway. It was like trying to walk through ink. I raised one hand out in front of me, fingers extended, and started feeling my way back. Straight down the hall. I knew the path. I'd done this 100 times. 1,000 probably. I walked slow, heel to toe, keeping one hand trailing lightly along the wall. I reached the end of the hall and turned what I thought was a right. A few more steps, then another right. That's when I saw something move. It wasn't just a flicker in the corner of my eye. It was a full shift, like a figure. A shadow. Something darker than the dark around it. It didn't move fast, either. It kind of floated, like it was stepping out toward me. My breath hitched in my throat. I stopped moving, standing dead still in the hallway, heart thumping. Everything went quiet again. I stood there for a long second. Then I told myself I was just tired, that it was probably nothing, that it could have been the light from my computer reflecting off the doorframe, or something stupid like that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was there, right there, something between me and my room. I took another step forward, this time more carefully. My hand found the edge of what I thought was the door frame, and I reached for the doorknob. That's when it happened again. The shadow moved. It came toward me, bigger this time. Closer. More distinct. I still couldn't focus on it exactly. My eyes weren't adjusting fast enough, but it was right there, inches away from me. It wasn't just something I saw. I felt it. I felt pressure in the air, this weird static-like sensation that made the hairs on my arms stand up. My stomach turned. My hand froze halfway toward the doorknob. I stood still again, barely breathing, listening for anything at all. A creak, a breath, a whisper of clothes moving. But there was nothing. The silence was just as complete as before. I started to question myself. Maybe it was a trick of the dark, or maybe my mind playing games because I was exhausted and alone in a quiet house. But it didn't feel like that. It felt real, tangible, like it had weight to it. I didn't want to call out. I didn't want to make noise and wake anyone up, especially not over something I couldn't even see clearly. So I took another slow step forward, this time fully reaching out to grab the doorknob. And that shadow moved again, right up to my face. I flinched back, stumbling slightly, reaching out with both hands like I was about to be grabbed or hit. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked up with fear, every childhood nightmare I'd ever had flooding back all at once. I thought about how I used to dream that my dad was coming after me with a knife. How those dreams felt just like this, silent, dark, slow, and terrifying. I hadn't had those dreams in years, but suddenly the memory of them felt fresh and too close. I stood there shaking. My hands were sweaty. My knees felt weak. It didn't make sense. I had just walked this path. I knew this hallway. Still, the shadow didn't move again. It just hovered there, in the dark. I leaned forward slightly, squinting, trying to make out details, trying to understand what the hell I was looking at. That's when my nose bumped into something cold and flat. Glass. It startled me more than it should have. I jerked back instinctively, completely confused for a second. Then I reached out with my hand and felt the surface. Smooth. Vertical. I moved my hand to the side and felt the edge of a frame. It hit me all at once. I wasn't at my bedroom door. I never made the second right turn. Instead, I had walked straight past it, like an idiot, disoriented in the dark, and ended up standing directly in front of the mirror that hangs next to my door on the adjacent wall. It was at a 90-degree angle, so when I turned and thought I was seeing something move toward me out of the door, I was actually just seeing my own reflection in the glass. The faint shape, the movement, the size, everything was just me, cast faintly in the hallway's ambient light. My own body, half illuminated by the glow of the computer screen leaking through the crack in my door, had been mistaken for something else. Something terrifying. Something other. I leaned my forehead against the mirror and exhaled. I didn't realize how hard I'd been holding my breath. My heart was still racing, and I felt this weird mixture of embarrassment and relief sweep over me. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just stood there for a second, letting my nerves settle, wiping the sweat off my hands on the front of my shirt. Eventually, I took the real right turn, found my actual bedroom door, opened it, and slipped back inside. The monitor light welcomed me, familiar and comforting. I sat back down in my chair and stared at the screen for a long moment, trying to collect myself. I didn't even feel tired anymore. I didn't feel like working either. I ended up just sitting there for a while, eyes drifting across the screen, brain still halfway in that dark hallway, still replaying the moment when the shadow came at me. It had felt so real. It reminded me how much your mind can turn nothing into something when you're alone in the dark. It reminded me how being in a familiar place doesn't always mean you're safe from fear. Sometimes, even in your comfort zone, even in a house you've known your whole life, your brain can betray you. I didn't leave the room again until the sun came up. It was early spring when my wife and I decided to take a short break from everything. We'd both been under a lot of pressure, me with work, her with some family stuff, and we figured a few days away in a quiet place might help. We chose a small rental property on the edge of Bath, England. It was one of those listings that didn't stand out at first, but something about it seemed peaceful. A single-level cottage with a stone front, gravel walkway, and a little black iron gate that led up to the entrance. Nothing fancy. Just private and quiet, which is all we really wanted. The place was cozy, smaller than the photos made it look, but that's to be expected. There was a living room with 2 old but clean couches, a small kitchen with a round wooden table tucked against the wall, and a single hallway that led to the bedroom and bath. It had a cold feel, the kind you get in old stone buildings, but the radiators worked well enough, and we spent the first day relaxing. We walked around Bath during the day, visited the Roman baths, stopped for coffee at a little shop tucked behind a church, and came back just before sundown. We had groceries and wine. We ate pasta and played cards until we were too tired to keep going. By 11 p.m., we were in bed, lights off, the place silent. The bedroom window looked out directly onto the small front garden and the gravel path. Just beyond that was the gate. The road past the gate wasn't busy, just a narrow country lane with hedges on either side. No traffic, no pedestrians after dark. It was perfect in theory. I wasn't fully asleep when I heard the gate. It was a soft metal click. Not loud, not dramatic, just the sound of it unlatching. I heard the gentle creak as it swung open and then shut again. That single moment, between the opening and closing, snapped every bit of sleep from my body. I was suddenly wide awake, my skin prickling, my body locked in stillness. The kind of stillness that only happens when your brain starts to shout that something isn't right. I didn't want to move too fast and wake my wife if it was nothing. But I knew deep down that it wasn't nothing. The sound was real, and someone had just come through the gate. I turned my head slowly and looked toward the window, not moving my body yet. The curtains were mostly closed, just a thin gap in the middle where the fabric didn't quite meet. I couldn't see anything through it, but I listened. And that's when I heard it, the unmistakable crunch of gravel. Whoever it was, they were trying to be quiet. But gravel doesn't allow that. Every step gave them away in a soft, uneven rhythm. It was slow, deliberate, not someone just passing through by accident. They were walking toward the front door. I sat up slowly, careful not to creak the bed, and put my feet on the floor. I kept still, listening as the steps moved closer. Then, suddenly, the motion sensor light outside flicked on. The whole side of the cottage lit up in a pale yellow glow, flooding through the gap in the curtains. My eyes shot toward the wall where the light from outside cast shadows, and that's when I saw it. A figure. Just a brief flash of their shadow against the wall outside, darting quickly, like they were trying to avoid being seen. The movement wasn't natural. It was jerky, nervous. They were caught off guard by the light. My heart was slamming in my chest now. My hands were shaking, but I stood up and moved carefully out of the bedroom. I didn't even glance back at my wife. She stirred slightly, but didn't say anything. I moved quickly and quietly through the small hallway and into the kitchen. The entire front of the cottage was still lit from the outside. I grabbed the largest knife from the wooden block on the counter. It felt ridiculous at first, holding a kitchen knife like I was in some kind of thriller movie. But the fear was real, and the adrenaline was stronger than the self-consciousness. I moved toward the front door, careful not to let the floorboards creak too loud under my weight. I pressed my back against the wall beside the doorframe, knife gripped in my right hand, and listened. Nothing, just silence. No footsteps, no gravel crunching, no sound of movement. The motion light was still on. It usually stayed on for about 20 or 30 seconds. I remembered reading that in the guest booklet. Then it shut off, and in that exact second, the moment the light went out, I heard it. Running. Fast, uneven steps sprinting back down the gravel walkway. The sound was heavy, not soft like before. Full-on panic mode. A few seconds later, the gate slammed hard. Not the soft, careful push from before. This time it was fast and loud, like they were in a rush to get away. I stayed frozen, knife raised, still listening. Then I stepped closer to the door and pulled the curtain on the small window to the side. Nothing. No one. A few seconds later, I heard my wife behind me. She was whispering, her voice low and unsure. She'd seen the same thing I did, the shadow, the light, the sudden burst of running. Neither of us slept the rest of the night. We sat in the living room, lights on, wrapped in blankets, the knife still close by. The police weren't worth calling. Nothing actually happened. No break-in, no damage, no clear crime. And it wasn't like we could describe anyone. We didn't see a face, just a shadow, a shape, something that didn't belong. By morning, the yard looked normal. The gate was shut. The gravel was undisturbed except for a few slightly deeper footprints that I noticed near the path. They could have been ours from earlier in the day, but but they seemed fresher. I couldn't be sure. We stayed one more night, mostly because we were too tired to pack up and move. But neither of us slept. We kept the lights on. I kept the knife on the bedside table. And the motion light, every time it flicked on during the night, I was up, standing, heart racing, checking the window. But nothing else happened. The next morning we left, exhausted. My nerves were shot. Every noise on the way to the car made me jump. Every person walking their dog or trimming a hedge seemed suspicious. I was looking at everyone like they might be the one from the night before. I still think about it. A lot. It's not the fear of what happened that sticks with me. It's the unknown. Why were they there? What were they planning to do? Why so quiet? Why retreat the moment the light turned off? It felt calculated, like they were waiting to see if we were awake, or testing something. And I keep going back to that moment, knife in hand, standing by the front door. If they had come through it, if they had pushed their luck just a little further, I would have used that knife. No doubt in my mind. My body wasn't just ready to defend. It was on edge, set to strike at the first sign of a threat. It was too close, too real, too deliberate. I've stayed in dozens of rentals before. Never thought twice about safety. Never even locked some of them. But after that night in Bath, everything changed. Now I check every lock twice. I put something heavy against the door. I scope out exits. I look at every motion light, every gate, every gravel path. My brain won't stop running the possibilities. My gut won't let it go. That shadow on the wall, it's etched in my memory. Not because of what it was, but because of what it almost became. It started with a road trip I hadn't planned to take. My cousin had called me 3 days earlier and asked if I could help him move some things from an old cabin his family owned in the mountains. He said he couldn't get any of his friends to help, and it'd only take a day or two max. I didn't want to go. I had work, stuff to do at home, errands piling up. But he was the kind of guy who'd help me without question if I asked, so I gave in. I packed a duffel bag, filled up my gas tank, and headed out at dawn on a Thursday. The drive was long. The first few hours were nothing special, highways, gas stations, the usual. But after I turned off the main road and started climbing into the mountains, the scenery changed. The trees thickened and the road narrowed. I didn't pass another car for nearly an hour. The air started to feel cooler, the sky a little darker, even though it was only early afternoon. The GPS signal flickered in and out. I wasn't nervous, just annoyed. Eventually I reached the cabin. It was a squat wooden building with a metal roof, surrounded by trees so thick they looked like they were leaning in. There was a small clearing out front with an old gravel driveway, and a tiny side shed half covered in vines. I didn't see my cousin's car. I checked my phone, no signal. That was weird, but I figured maybe he hadn't arrived yet. Maybe he was delayed. I parked and got out. The air was dead silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just the sound of my own boots crunching the gravel. I walked up to the front door. It wasn't locked, so I pushed it open and called out his name. Nothing. The inside looked like it hadn't been used in a while. Dust on everything. A few old chairs, a rolled-up rug, a wood stove. Boxes stacked near the back wall. Some of them were labeled, others weren't. I figured I'd wait for him, so I dropped my bag by the door and sat in one of the chairs. Hours passed. I read a book I brought. Ate a snack. Still no sign of him. By evening, I started feeling uneasy. Not scared exactly, just not right. I walked outside to get some air. The sun was already sinking behind the trees, painting everything in this weird gold light. I kept thinking I was hearing something move behind the trees, little cracks and rustles. But every time I turned my head, nothing was there. Probably deer or squirrels. I told myself that, but it didn't help. I waited until full dark before finally deciding to call it a night. There was a mattress on the floor in the back room. I laid out my sleeping bag and tried to sleep, but I kept waking up. Every time I dozed off, some small noise outside the cabin would snap me awake again. A branch snapping, something brushing the side of the building, the creak of wood shifting. I kept telling myself it was normal. Old building, forest animals. But still, I couldn't shake this crawling feeling in my stomach, like something wasn't right. Around 2 a.m., I heard something different. It wasn't an animal sound. It was more deliberate. Heavy, slow crunches on the gravel outside. Someone walking. My heart started pounding. I held my breath, straining to hear. The steps stopped near the side of the cabin. Then silence. I waited, every muscle in my body tensed. Then I heard it, 3 knocks. Not on the front door. On the wall. Like someone knocking just to see if anyone was inside. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the wall, barely lit by the moonlight coming through the window. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then more knocks, closer this time. A little lower on the wall. I wanted to move, to get up, to grab my flashlight or the pocket knife in my bag, but I was frozen. Then the sound stopped again. I stayed like that until dawn. When it was finally light enough, I got up and walked the perimeter of the cabin. I didn't see anything. No footprints. No damage. Nothing. It had rained a bit in the night, so if someone had been walking, there should have been some sign, but the gravel looked undisturbed. I tried telling myself it was a dream. Maybe I'd been half asleep. Maybe it was a raccoon. But I didn't believe that. I was about to leave. I didn't care if my cousin showed up or not. I was done. But when I got to my car, it wouldn't start. The engine clicked but wouldn't turn over. I tried again and again, but nothing. I popped the hood, thinking maybe I could fix it, but I don't know enough about cars. I stood there, looking around, trying to decide what to do. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A small pile of rocks stacked on the edge of the driveway. They hadn't been there the day before. For rocks, balanced carefully on top of each other. Not random. Not natural. Someone had made that. I didn't know what it meant, but I didn't like it. I went back inside and started packing my stuff. I figured I'd grab my gear and walk down the road until I found a signal or another car. I stuffed everything into my duffel, grabbed my water bottle, and stepped outside. The rocks were gone. I swear they were there 10 minutes earlier. I'd seen them. I'd stared at them. But now the spot was bare gravel. I didn't hear anything. Didn't see anyone. Just empty woods. I didn't wait. I started walking. The road was long and winding. I walked for an hour, then 2. Still no signal. Still no sign of a car or house or anything. Just trees, endless trees. The sun was getting higher. The heat picked up. My water started to run low. After nearly 4 hours of walking, I heard something behind me. Just a soft scuff, like a foot dragging against dirt. I turned around fast, but the road was empty. I stood still for a moment, then kept going. Every once in a while, I'd hear another step. Then silence. Then another. Like someone was matching my pace, just out of sight. I started walking faster. Eventually I came to a fork in the road. One path went downhill, the other curved uphill into more forest. No signs. No markers. I didn't remember this from the drive-in, but I hadn't been paying close attention. I chose the downhill path, thinking it might lead to a town or a main road. I walked for another hour. Then I realized something that made my blood run cold. I passed the same spot I'd seen earlier. The same fallen log on the left side of the road. The same tree with a hollow knot in its trunk. I remembered stepping over a puddle that had a strange shape like a footprint. I was walking in a circle. That wasn't possible. I hadn't turned around. I'd walked in a straight line. There were no turns, no loops. I stood there, breathing hard, trying not to panic. I pulled out my phone again. Still no signal. I turned around and started walking back the way I came. Another hour passed. The sun was starting to dip again. My legs ached. My mouth was dry. I felt like something was watching me. I kept hearing things, a cough, a breath, a soft whistle, but never saw anything. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone just standing there, half hidden by the trees. But there was never anyone. Eventually, I saw a structure up ahead. Not the cabin, something different. A small shack, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, made of old weathered wood. No windows, just a door. It looked abandoned. I didn't want to go near it, but I was desperate. Maybe there was something useful inside. A phone, a radio, anything. I approached slowly. The door wasn't locked, so I pushed it open. It was empty. No furniture, no supplies, nothing. Just a dirt floor and walls covered in scratches. Not marks from animals. These were deliberate. Dozens of lines carved deep into the wood. Some were short. Some were long. Some had names next to them. Others were just dates. Years and years of marks. I stood there, staring at them, not understanding. Then I noticed something in the corner. A small pile of clothing. Torn. Dirty. Like someone had left in a hurry, or hadn't made it out. I felt sick. I backed out of the shack and started walking again. Fast this time. My heart was pounding, and my mouth was dry. By nightfall, I still hadn't found the cabin again. I was just lost in the trees. Everything looked the same. I didn't even have the road anymore. Somehow I'd wandered off it, and now I was just crashing through brush, tripping over roots, pushing branches out of my face. Then I saw light, a single flickering glow through the trees. I moved toward it, even though every part of me said not to. I stepped into another clearing, and there was the cabin. The same one, my cousin's family cabin. I'd walked in a full circle again. The front door was open. I didn't leave it open. I was sure of that. I should have turned and run, but I was so exhausted and scared and confused that I went inside. My bag was still there. My water bottle was empty. I sat down and tried to collect myself. That night was the worst. I heard movement all around the cabin, footsteps circling, scraping against the walls. I didn't sleep. I sat there with my back to the wall, eyes fixed on the door, knife in my hand. At one point, I thought I saw a shadow pass by the window, but when I checked, nothing was there. I stayed like that until morning. When the sun finally came up, I made a decision. I wasn't going to walk. I wasn't going to wait. I was going to try the car one more time, and if it didn't start, I was going to break a window, hotwire it, whatever it took. I got in, turned the key, and it started. I didn't ask why or how. I just drove. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I got off that mountain, back to the highway, back to a gas station with people and lights and noise. When I finally got home, I tried calling my cousin. He said he'd never called me. Said he hadn't been up to that cabin in over a year. I didn't believe him. I still don't. But I won't go back there. Not ever again. The dirt road to the cabin was barely wide enough for my car. Dry leaves crunched under the tires, and the branches overhead blocked most of the sunlight. I'd taken the day off to get away from the noise of the city, hoping the silence of the woods would help clear my head. Work had been a nightmare for weeks, and I hadn't really slept in days. I borrowed the cabin from a friend. He told me it was bare bones, no Wi-Fi, no TV, and spotty cell reception at best. That was exactly what I wanted. Just me, a few books, and some peace. I had enough canned food, bottled water, and batteries to last a week. The plan was to hike during the day, maybe fish a little, and sleep early every night. When I got there, the place was even more isolated than I expected. No other houses in sight. Just trees, hills, and the narrow path that led me there. The cabin was small and wooden, with a tin roof and a front porch that creaked when I stepped on it. Inside, it was one room with a small bathroom, a twin bed, a kitchen counter, and a wood stove. Simple but clean. I dropped my bag, opened a window to let the air in, and sat on the edge of the bed for a while. That first night was quiet. Too quiet, almost. No car horns, no sirens, no hum of traffic through a window. Just the occasional chirp of crickets or the distant hoot of an owl. I read until my eyes felt heavy, then turned off my flashlight and lay in the dark. The mattress was thin, but I didn't care. I finally felt alone, in a good way. But I didn't sleep well. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up in a sweat. Not from a nightmare. I didn't remember dreaming at all, but just this weird feeling like something wasn't right. The air in the room felt thick. Not hot, just heavy, like the pressure had dropped. I turned on my flashlight and scanned the room. Everything was as I left it. The door was still locked. The window was open, but the screen was intact. Nothing moved. I stayed awake for maybe an hour, then fell back asleep. The next morning, I went for a hike. I followed a marked trail for a while, but then got curious and started exploring some unmarked paths. Nothing too far. I was careful to keep track of where I was, but I liked the feeling of wandering where no one else had walked in a while. I saw deer tracks in the mud, some squirrels, a fox. No people, no voices, just me and the trees. I was out for about 5 hours before heading back to the cabin. My legs were sore and my shirt was damp with sweat. I made some ramen on the portable stove, ate on the porch, then spent the evening reading again. When the sun went down, the air cooled fast. I closed the window and crawled into bed early. That night, I heard something. It started with soft crunching outside the cabin, like footsteps but slow. I froze under the blanket, listening. There were no other cabins nearby. No cars. No reason anyone else would be out here. I told myself it was an animal. A deer. A raccoon. Maybe even a bear. But it didn't sound like a 4-legged animal. It sounded like a person, walking around slowly, careful not to make too much noise. I sat up and reached for the flashlight. I didn't turn it on right away, just held it in my hand, staring at the door. The cabin had no curtains, just wooden shutters on the windows. They were closed. I waited. The footsteps stopped. I stayed like that for almost an hour. Still nothing. No sounds. No movement. Eventually, I laid back down, but I didn't fall asleep for a long time. In the morning, I checked around the cabin. Nothing unusual. No footprints, though the ground was mostly dry and covered in leaves, so it'd be hard to tell anyway. I shrugged it off. I hadn't seen a single person since I got here. Probably just an animal. I went about my day, another hike, some journaling, and more reading. That night, it happened again. More footsteps. But this time, they didn't stop. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard them again. Slow, deliberate steps circling the cabin. They'd stop for a minute, then pick back up. It was like whoever, or whatever, knew I was listening. It was trying to mess with me. This time, I got up. I turned on the flashlight, grabbed the small hatchet I'd brought for chopping firewood, and stood by the door. I didn't open it. I just waited. Eventually, the sound stopped again. But now I was wide awake. Every sound outside felt louder. The wind through the trees, the creaking of the porch, even the rustle of leaves, it all felt intentional. Like someone was trying to scare me. I didn't sleep at all that night. In the morning, I decided to hike a bit less. I stayed near the cabin, checking the area more carefully. Still nothing. No broken branches, no fresh prints, no trash left behind. I started to feel like I was losing it. Maybe the isolation was messing with me. Maybe I'd just imagined it. But I didn't want to leave. Not yet. I'd told myself I'd stay for a week, and it had only been 3 days. I was stubborn like that. That evening, I sat on the porch until it got dark. I kept the hatchet by my side and watched the woods. I wanted to see something, to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. Around midnight, I heard it again. This time, it was louder, closer. It started on the side of the cabin, near the bathroom window. Slow steps, then a pause. Then more steps, toward the front. I stood up, holding the flashlight and the hatchet tight. My heart was beating so hard I felt it in my neck. Then came the sound of something brushing against the wall, like a hand dragging along the wooden siding. I snapped. I ran to the door, yanked it open, and shined the flashlight outside. The beam cut through the dark like a blade. Nothing, just trees and shadows. But then I saw it, just for a second, at the edge of the woods, maybe 30 feet out. A figure, not clear, just the outline of someone, standing still, watching. I stepped out onto the porch, aiming the flashlight at them. But as soon as the light touched where they'd been, they were gone. I didn't sleep that night either. I locked the door, shut the shutters, and stayed sitting up with my back to the wall, watching the door. The next morning, I made up my mind. I was going to leave. I packed up everything, threw it into the car, and got ready to go. I didn't care if I had to eat the remaining cost of the trip. I needed out. But as I backed down the dirt path, I realized something that made my blood run cold. There were tire tracks in the dirt. Not mine. A different set. Slightly wider. Deeper tread. Coming in from the main road and stopping not far from the cabin. Then turning around and heading back out. Someone else had driven up here. Recently. I looked around but saw nothing. The woods were still. Too still. I told myself it was just someone exploring. Maybe another cabin owner checking the area. But I hadn't seen another structure for miles. I drove out fast, heart racing the whole way. Once I hit the highway, I stopped at a gas station and tried to calm down. I bought a coffee, sat in the car with the engine running, and just tried to make sense of it. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe it was all just wildlife and coincidence. But then I checked the back of the car. There were scratches on the trunk. Long, thin lines that hadn't been there before. Like someone had dragged a key, or a knife, along the metal. 3 deep grooves. That night, I stayed at a motel near the edge of town. Cheap place, but it had lights, locks, and other people. I double-checked all the locks, pulled the curtains tight, and tried to get some sleep. But I couldn't. Not because of noise. Not because of fear. Because at some point during the night, my phone buzzed. I picked it up from the nightstand and saw an airdrop request. From an unknown device. The name was just nearby. No picture, just the prompt to accept or decline. I clicked decline and turned off Bluetooth. I didn't think much of it. Probably someone nearby trying to send something by accident. But then I opened my camera roll the next morning. There were 3 photos I didn't take. All of them were of me. One was through the window of the cabin. I was sitting on the porch with the hatchet, looking into the trees. One was through the window of the motel room. I was lying on the bed, eyes closed, light still on. And the last one was from inside the cabin. It showed me sleeping. Blanket pulled up to my chest, flashlight next to my head. I stared at the photos for a long time. Then I threw the phone in the motel sink and smashed it with the heel of my boot until the screen cracked and the back popped off. I left the motel within 10 minutes. I didn't go home. Not right away. I drove to my brother's place 3 states away. I didn't explain everything, just told him I needed a break. That was 6 months ago. I never went back to the cabin. I never talked to my friend about it. Never asked if anyone else had stayed there before. Never checked the news or the police reports. I didn't want to know. Sometimes, I still feel like I'm being watched. Like when I'm walking back to my apartment at night. Or when I'm at the grocery store and someone's standing a little too close behind me. Or when I'm in bed and hear the floor creak, even though I live alone. I changed my phone, changed my number. I keep the curtains closed. I lock the door 5 times before bed. But I still can't sleep right. Because somewhere out there, someone knows what I look like when I sleep. They stood close enough to hear me breathe. Close enough to take a photo. And I don't know why. Or if they're finished. I remember that whole stretch of time too clearly, even though I try not to. The images still come back on quiet nights, dull, colorless flashes, like watching a CCTV recording in my own mind. It wasn't supposed to be anything out of the ordinary. Just a quick favor, that's all. A simple drive, for hours south to help my cousin pick up a busted 4-wheeler he bought off some guy online. Nothing more. It was late November. The air had that dry bite to it that made your lips crack and your fingers stiff. I had just gotten back from a work trip the night before and hadn't even unpacked, but I owed my cousin. He had helped me with so many things over the years, especially after my dad passed. So when he called asking if I could tag along for the drive and help load the 4-wheeler into his trailer, I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed a jacket, filled my thermos, and we hit the road just after sunrise. We headed down south into the edge of the mountains, a more rural and wooded part of the state, dotted with small towns that didn't even show up right on GPS. The 4-wheeler was sitting in a barn behind a guy's property way off one of those thin roads that turns to gravel after a few miles. It wasn't in great shape, but it had good bones, my cousin said, and the guy was practically giving it away. We strapped it down to the trailer by mid-afternoon. The guy seemed normal enough, older, quiet. Told us to be careful driving back, because the road twisted up through the woods and got narrow in places. It wasn't until we were already on the way back that the trouble started. About an hour into the drive, the trailer started wobbling a bit. Nothing major at first, just enough for us to feel it in the truck. My cousin pulled off to the side to check it. One of the trailer tires was looking soft. Real soft. He swore he had checked the pressure before we left. There was no cell signal, not even a bar. We tried driving a little further, but the tire went flat completely within a few miles. We were lucky we found a spot wide enough on the side of the road to pull over. We got out and started trying to figure out if we could change the tire there. My cousin had a spare, but it wasn't great. Still better than nothing. The sun was dropping fast, and the temperature came down with it. I could see my breath while holding the flashlight. We took turns cranking the jack and getting the bolts loose. The whole process took longer than it should have, mostly because the bolts were rusted and frozen stiff. By the time we finished and lowered the trailer, it was nearly dark. There were no houses anywhere in sight, just trees. Trees so thick and tall they leaned in on both sides of the road, making everything feel narrower. I could tell by the way my cousin was breathing that he didn't like it either, though he never said it out loud. The air was totally still. No birds, no wind. Just that kind of dead quiet that makes your ears ring a little. We got back into the truck and started driving again, slower this time. The spare on the trailer was small and wobbly, and the road felt rougher somehow, like it had changed under us while we were working. The pavement was cracked and uneven, and in the dark, it felt like we were bouncing along a dirt path. We didn't see any other cars. No headlights behind us. No oncoming traffic. Just blackness on both sides and the weak beam of our headlights in front. After about 30 minutes, the GPS went completely blank. Screen frozen. Then it just reset. It showed we were off-road, even though we hadn't turned once. My cousin tapped the screen and muttered under his breath. I kept my eyes on the trees. Something about them felt wrong. They were too close, too uniform, like they weren't real trees, just copies pasted in from a bad memory. Then we hit something. It wasn't big, maybe a bump or a rock, but it made the trailer jump hard and nearly sent us into the ditch. We stopped, checked it again. Nothing seemed broken, but the axle looked a little twisted now, like the trailer was tilting ever so slightly to one side. There was a pull to the right while driving, subtle but constant. We decided to keep going anyway. What choice did we have? That's when we passed the cabin. It came out of nowhere. Just a faint shape off to the left, behind a clearing. We wouldn't have even noticed it if the high beams hadn't caught a sliver of reflective glass. It was set back a bit, probably 30 or 40 yards off the road, surrounded by tall brush and more trees. The structure looked old, roof sagging, chimney crumbling. One window was boarded up. Another had a curtain, torn and limp, barely hanging. My cousin slowed down without saying anything. I could feel him thinking. Maybe someone in there had a phone. Maybe they could give us directions or tell us how far we were from the nearest town. But something about it, it just didn't feel right. He pulled into the clearing anyway. We parked, headlights pointing toward the cabin. The brush was thick around it, but there was a path of dead grass leading to the front steps. No lights inside. No movement. Just that same stillness from before. I told my cousin I didn't like it. He said it'd be quick. Just knock, ask, and leave. He went up while I stayed by the truck. I kept my hand on the door handle, ready to bolt if anything felt off. He knocked once. Waited. Knocked again. No answer. He turned to look at me, shrugged, then reached for the door. It opened. Not all the way. Just a crack. But enough. He stepped in without looking back. I waited. 1 minute. 2. Nothing. I honked the horn once. Still nothing. I got out and walked up the path slow. My feet sank into the soft ground with every step. The wood of the porch groaned under me. I pushed the door open wider. Inside, it was darker than it should have been. The little light from outside barely reached the walls. I called out for my cousin. No response. I moved further in, stepping slow, careful not to trip. The floor was uneven. There was furniture inside, but barely, just a broken table, a chair, and a couch that looked like it had been eaten alive by moths. Dust in the air. Smelled like mildew and rot. Then I saw his flashlight lying on the ground. Still on. Just sitting there, casting a dim white circle across the wooden floor. No sign of him. I picked it up, heart hammering. Called his name again. Nothing. I moved through the cabin, past the small kitchen area, toward the back. There was a hallway. Narrow. One door on the left, one at the end. I checked the left first. Empty room. Just old mattresses on the floor, bare walls, a cracked mirror leaning against one corner. I turned back to the hallway and opened the last door. It led to a basement. Narrow stairs going down into total darkness. The smell was stronger here. Damp. Old. Like wet concrete and rotting wood. I stood there, frozen, staring down. My mind was split. Part of me yelling to leave, the other part screaming that I couldn't go without him. I started down, step by step. The stairs groaned under my weight. The air got colder the lower I went. The flashlight beam shook in my hand. At the bottom was a concrete floor and one single room. Bare walls. A workbench. Some tools scattered around. And in the far corner, movement. I swung the beam that way and saw him. My cousin. He was sitting on the ground, back against the wall, staring forward. His eyes were wide, unfocused. I rushed over, dropped to my knees, grabbed his shoulders. He was breathing, but barely. I pulled him up, got him on his feet. He didn't speak, didn't even blink. We climbed the stairs together, one step at a time. He stumbled, almost fell twice. I dragged him out of the cabin, across the clearing, back to the truck. Got him in, slammed the door, started the engine and drove. I didn't stop. Not once. Not when the road narrowed more. Not when we hit a fallen branch. Not even when I saw headlights behind us, just for a second, then gone. We drove until the trees thinned and the road widened. A gas station appeared on the horizon, like a lighthouse. I pulled in shaking, heart still pounding. Inside, the light was harsh and sterile. A radio played quietly. My cousin sat in the truck, unmoving. I called for help. EMTs came. They took him inside, checked him out. His vitals were okay. Just shocked. That's what they said. But he didn't speak. Not that night. Not the next day. Not for a full week. Eventually, he talked again. Said he didn't remember anything after stepping into the cabin. Just flashes, cold, darkness, footsteps behind him. That's all. We never went back. Never told anyone the full story, either. People wouldn't believe it. They'd think we were making it up or exaggerating. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt in that place. The thing that sticks with me the most isn't what was in the basement. It's what wasn't. There were no chains, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Nothing. Just him, sitting there in silence, like he had been waiting, like something had been watching. And the door, when I went back for a second to grab his flashlight from the porch, I swear it was shut tight, like it had never been open at all. The sky was still a deep blue when I pulled my old truck into the parking lot at the base of Miller's Ridge. It wasn't a real trailhead, just a dirt pull-off about 20 minutes off the main road. I'd been here a few times over the years, but not recently. I remembered it being quiet, remote, the kind of place people forget exists. That's exactly what I wanted. I had taken a week off work after quitting my job at the garage. I didn't even tell anyone I was going. I just packed my gear, tossed it in the bed of the truck, and drove. I had my tent, some food, 2 big jugs of water, and a few other essentials. It wasn't anything special, just a solo trip to clear my head. I locked up the truck, threw my pack over my shoulders, and started walking. The first part of the trail was easy, a wide dirt path with trees flanking both sides. Crickets buzzed somewhere in the underbrush, and a warm breeze rustled the leaves. It was peaceful. I didn't see another car, didn't hear another voice, not even in the distance. That was the whole point. Get away. No phone. No internet. Just me in the woods. After about 2 hours, the trail narrowed into something more rugged. Branches scraped at my arms, and my boots kicked up dry dust. I passed a rusted old fence post sticking out of the ground at an odd angle. It wasn't connected to anything anymore, and I figured it had once marked the edge of someone's land. A long time ago. I paused just long enough to sip from my water bottle, then moved on. By late afternoon, I reached the clearing I'd remembered. It sat in a little hollow surrounded by trees. There was a fire ring of stones someone had built years ago, and a large flat area with soft moss where I could pitch the tent. I dropped my pack and stood for a minute listening. Just wind. Just birds. Nothing else. I set up camp quickly, slipping the tent poles into place, hammering the stakes into the soft dirt, unrolling my sleeping bag inside. I gathered some dry sticks and built a small fire, just enough to heat a can of soup. I ate while watching the last light disappear behind the trees. The woods got real dark after sunset, the kind of dark that city people forget exists. I liked it. I stayed up for a while, poking at the fire, staring into the flames. Then I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and lay back. My sleeping bag was warm, and I could still hear the fire crackling softly outside. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The second day was uneventful. I woke up, made coffee over the fire, and wandered around the woods near my camp. I didn't have a map, but I knew I wasn't going far. Just exploring. I found a few deer tracks near a dry creek bed, and an old metal can wedged under a rock. I pulled it out, brushed the dirt off. It looked like one of those big soup cans from the 80s, faded and dented. The forest here felt untouched. There were no signs, no fences, no trash. Every few minutes, I'd stop and listen. Nothing but wind and birds. That evening, I was sitting by the fire again when I noticed something strange. A few rocks near the edge of the clearing had been moved, just slightly, like they'd been pushed aside. I stared at them for a long minute, trying to remember if I'd walked over there. Maybe I kicked one and didn't notice, but the moss looked undisturbed. It was just odd. I chalked it up to animals. Maybe a raccoon or something had been nosing around. I went to bed that night with the fire still smoldering, zipped up the tent, and tried not to think too much. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun wasn't quite up yet, but the sky had turned that cold gray color that means dawn isn't far. I sat up, stretched, and unzipped the tent. That's when I noticed the boot prints. Not mine. These were larger, wider. Deep, like someone heavy had stepped into the soft dirt not 20 feet from my tent. I got up slowly, scanning the area. The prints led from the edge of the clearing to the fire ring, then back into the trees. My heart started beating faster. I looked at my boots, then at the prints again. They didn't match. Mine were smaller, with a different tread. I crouched down and stared at the ground, trying to convince myself I was wrong. Maybe they were old. Maybe I'd just missed them yesterday. But they looked fresh. The edges were sharp. No leaves had fallen in them yet. I didn't hear anything during the night. I didn't wake up once. If someone had been near my tent, I should have heard it. Should have felt it. I didn't know what to do. There was no cell signal out here, no one around for miles. I didn't want to panic, but I also didn't want to ignore it. I packed up my food and gear and sat by the cold fire pit, just watching the woods. I didn't move for over an hour. Just listened. Waited. Nothing. Eventually, I forced myself to eat something. I considered packing up and leaving, but I hated the idea of running scared. It could have been a hunter. Maybe someone else had come out here and didn't realize I was camping. Maybe they saw my tent and left. That was the most logical explanation. Still, I kept my knife on me the rest of the day. I didn't hike, didn't wander. I stayed near the tent, kept my ears open. Every sound in the forest felt louder. Every bird call made me jump. When night came, I didn't light a fire. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I just lay in the tent, knife in my hand, eyes wide open. I listened to the wind, the creaking branches, the soft rustle of something moving through leaves every so often. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, the prints were gone. Not like they were erased, just no new ones. Nothing near the tent, nothing near the trees. But I found something else. A torn piece of black fabric stuck to a branch near the clearing. It was maybe 4 inches long, caught on a jagged twig. I pulled it down and turned it over in my hands. Looked like part of a jacket. The kind of material you find on work coats. It was damp, a little muddy. I didn't recognize it. Something about that fabric unsettled me more than the footprints. It meant someone had been close enough to brush against a branch, close enough to tear something. I told myself it still didn't mean danger. Maybe someone got lost. Maybe they came through after dark and didn't see me. Still, I made the decision to leave the next morning. I just needed to make it one more night. That evening, I didn't cook anything. I didn't want any smells giving away my location. I stayed in the tent as soon as the sun dipped behind the trees. The woods got colder, quieter. The wind had died completely, which made the smallest sounds feel loud. I lay still for hours, barely blinking, ears straining. Then I heard it. A crunch, like a footstep on dry leaves. Not a squirrel, not a deer. Something heavier, slower. It came from the north side of the clearing. Close. I held my breath. My heart thudded so loud I was afraid it would drown out the sounds. I waited. Another step. Then silence. I didn't move. Didn't dare even shift in the sleeping bag. The tent walls were thin. Just nylon. I felt like if I moved, it would give me away. Minutes passed. Another step. Then another. Closer. Then nothing. I lay there for what felt like hours. Eventually, I must have drifted off out of pure exhaustion. When I woke up, it was light outside. The tent was damp with dew, and everything was quiet again. Too quiet. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, scanning the clearing. That's when I saw it. A small pile of stones near the edge of my camp. 5 of them, stacked in a neat little tower. Not natural. Not random. Someone had placed them like that. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't threatening. Not really. But it felt deliberate. Like a message. I couldn't explain why, but my gut twisted into knots. That was it. I wasn't waiting around another night. I tore down the tent, stuffed everything into my pack, and started hiking back. I moved fast, barely stopping to drink water. The trail felt longer than I remembered. Every tree looked the same. Every sound made me whip my head around. After 2 hours, I stopped to rest. Sat on a fallen log, took a drink. That's when I noticed something in the dirt a few feet away. Another boot print. Same size as before. Facing the direction I came from. I got up and started walking faster. Almost jogging. My pack bounced on my shoulders. Sweat dripped down my back. I didn't stop again. When I finally reached the parking lot, my truck was there. Untouched. No other cars. I unlocked it, tossed my gear in, and drove. I didn't look back. I didn't sleep well for weeks after that. Kept thinking about the prints, the fabric, the stacked stones. It wasn't a ghost story. There was no monster in the woods. but someone had been there, watching, walking around my tent at night, close enough to touch it. I still don't know who they were or what they wanted, but I haven't been back to Miller's Ridge since. The night I truly understood fear didn't happen in some far-off place or haunted location. It happened during a solo drive through a part of the country I thought I knew. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, and no one expected me back for a couple of days. That was probably the biggest mistake. I had taken a few days off work. I was burned out, tired of sitting at a desk, tired of emails, tired of people. I didn't want to go to some resort or a tourist-heavy place where I'd just be swapping one kind of noise for another. I just wanted quiet, open roads, peace, and isolation. I picked a route that cut through the rural parts of the state, long stretches of nothing but hills, old barns, and trees. The kind of areas where you don't pass another car for miles. That's what I wanted. I left early that morning. My car was packed with a sleeping bag, a small cooler, some snacks, a flashlight, and a battery pack. I didn't plan to camp, but I wanted to be ready for anything. I had no reservations, no fixed stops. I just drove. The first few hours were great. I rolled the windows down, let the wind come in, let the music play loud, and didn't check my phone even once. The towns got smaller, the road signs fewer, and eventually I hit one of those stretches of two-lane highway where the trees press in close, and the only thing you hear is the engine and your own thoughts. It was around 6 p.m. when I pulled off for gas. It was an old station, 2 pumps, no lights, and what looked like a closed shop beside it. There was no one around. I debated just skipping it, but my tank was under a quarter, and I didn't know how far the next town would be. Against my better judgment, I stopped. The pump worked, though it was slow. I filled up, paid with a card at the old machine, and got back in the car. The sun was getting low. I thought about finding a motel soon, but I didn't see anything on the map. I decided I'd keep going another hour or so and see what popped up. I had passed a dirt road a few miles back that I was curious about. It led into some wooded hills and looked peaceful, so I turned around and headed toward it. The road was narrow and uneven. Trees leaned over it from both sides, and after just a few minutes, I lost cell signal completely. The dirt path wound through forested terrain, getting bumpier the deeper I went. At one point, I had to slow to a crawl because a tree had partially fallen across the road. I debated turning around, but something about the quiet kept pulling me in. I felt like I was moving away from everything stressful, everything fake. I drove for another 15 minutes before I came to a clearing. It was small, just a patch of flattened grass surrounded by trees. There were no tire tracks, no signs of other people. It felt untouched. I turned the engine off and sat for a moment listening. Nothing. No birds, no wind, no insects. Just silence. That should have been a red flag, but I was too caught up in the peace of it. I got out, stretched my legs, and walked a small loop around the clearing. The woods were dense. Old trees, thick trunks, and underbrush that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I decided I'd rest here for a while. I wasn't tired enough to sleep, but I laid the sleeping bag out in the back of my car, cracked the windows, and leaned the seat back. Maybe an hour passed. The sun was completely down by then. I sat in the car, eating chips and listening to the crickets. Finally, some sound again. I turned the interior light off and just sat there in the dim blue light from the dashboard. Then I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a light snap, like a branch being stepped on. I sat up straight and looked out the windshield. Nothing. I leaned forward and peered through the side windows. Still nothing. I told myself it was probably a deer or some animal passing through. I didn't move. I just kept listening. Another snap. Closer this time. Not right beside the car, but within maybe 20 feet. I looked again. Still couldn't see anything through the trees. My heart rate had picked up, and I felt a chill run across my skin, even though the air was warm. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box and turned it on, quickly pointing it out the driver's side window. The beam lit up the trees, but nothing moved. The underbrush was still. No glowing eyes, no rustling. I stayed like that for a while, light sweeping across the woods in slow arcs, looking for movement. Then I heard breathing. It was faint, but definitely there. Not animal-like. It wasn't sniffing or panting. It sounded like someone breathing through their nose, deep, steady inhales and exhales. The sound was coming from behind the car. I turned the flashlight quickly toward the back window, but it was too fogged up to see clearly. I rolled the window down an inch and shone the light out into the dark. Nothing, just trees, but the breathing had stopped. I didn't move. My hands were tight around the flashlight. I turned the car on and flicked the headlights on. Nothing. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. No movement. Eventually, I convinced myself it must have been my imagination or an animal. I still wasn't ready to sleep, but I didn't want to stay out in the open anymore. I backed out of the clearing slowly, driving back the way I came. That's when I realized the dirt road looked different. I had followed it straight in earlier, but now it curved, twisted in a way I didn't remember. Trees looked closer together. The way forward was rougher, rockier. I stopped and checked the map again. Still no signal. I tried to retrace my steps the best I could. I must have missed a turn, because after another 10 minutes, I ended up at a completely different clearing. This one was smaller, and the grass looked flattened like something had been dragged across it recently. My stomach sank. I didn't recognize anything. I turned the car around and started driving faster, trying to find the main road again. Then I saw something. Just ahead, on the left side of the road, there was a shape. At first, I thought it was a fallen tree limb. But as I got closer, I saw it was fabric. A coat or a blanket, crumpled at the base of a tree. I slowed down, headlights illuminating it. There were shoes next to it, upright, placed neatly side by side. I stopped the car. I didn't get out. I sat there, staring at the shoes, the coat, the way they looked like someone had undressed right there and vanished. No footprints, no sign of struggle, just placed there. My hands were sweating now. I put the car in reverse and backed away fast. About 15 minutes later, the road finally began to smooth out again. I saw a metal fence post, then a broken-down wooden gate. I was near the main road. Relief hit me like a wave. I drove until I found a wide shoulder, pulled over, and just sat there breathing hard, trying to make sense of it. That's when I noticed the back window. Smears. Not fingerprints, just long smears like someone had run their hand across the glass. My windows had been clean when I parked. I stared at the marks. I hadn't heard the car being touched. I hadn't seen anything. But someone or something had been right up against the car. Maybe while I was inside. Maybe while I was outside checking the road. I didn't sleep that night. I kept driving until I found a 24-hour diner near a small highway town. I sat inside, drank coffee until the sun came up. The staff gave me weird looks, but they didn't ask anything. I didn't tell them. Who would believe me? The next day, I drove straight home. I didn't take back roads. I stuck to the highway, past dozens of cars, stopped only in busy areas. When I finally walked through the front door, it felt like returning from a different planet. I showered twice, slept for 12 hours. A week later, I decided to check the car one last time. I had avoided it since I got back. It felt stupid, but I needed to make sure everything was normal again. I went to the garage, opened the door, and stood in front of the back window. There was something stuck to the wiper blade. I opened the hatch slowly. It was a piece of paper, folded in half. No markings on the outside. I opened it. It was blank, except for a single word, written in shaky, uneven letters. Soon, I stood there, paper in hand, the smell of dust and oil in the air, heart thudding so hard I could barely breathe. I moved. I sold the car a few days later. I haven't been back to that part of the state. I don't even take long drives anymore. I told people it was engine problems, that I just didn't trust the car after the trip. No one questioned it. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know what was out there. And I know it wasn't done. I never found out who or what left that paper. I changed all my locks. Got a security system. Moved apartments again 6 months later. Nothing ever happened after that. But I still can't sleep with the windows open. I still flinch when I hear footsteps behind me, even if they're just mine. And sometimes late at night, I get the feeling that someone's standing just outside the window, watching, waiting, just like they did before. The day started out normal. I remember that clearly. It was the kind of day where everything feels so plain, you don't expect anything unusual to happen. I had the whole weekend free and decided to drive out to this old piece of land my grandfather used to own. It was about 2.5 hours from where I lived now, tucked into the edge of a wide forest that hadn't changed much in the last 50 years. He passed away almost 10 years ago, and the property sat there untouched, still in the family, but no one visited anymore. There wasn't much to see, just a rusted gate, an overgrown gravel path, and what was left of a shed and the old barn foundation. I don't know what made me want to go there. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was nostalgia. I hadn't been out that way since I was a teenager. My plan was simple: drive out there, walk around a bit, maybe take some pictures, eat a sandwich in the truck, and come home. I didn't even tell anyone I was going. It felt that casual. By the time I pulled off the main road and rattled through the gate, it was late morning. I parked under the same old oak tree where we used to string up a hammock when I was a kid. The path ahead was mostly covered in tall weeds and some fallen branches, but I could still see the outline of it stretching into the trees. I grabbed my water bottle and phone and started walking down it, brushing aside tall grass with my forearm. It felt peaceful. The wind moved through the trees gently, and the heat wasn't too bad yet. The air changed once I got about a half-mile in. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt heavier, thicker somehow. There wasn't as much wind anymore, and the birds had gone quiet. I stopped and looked around for a second, trying to figure out if it was just my imagination, but everything looked normal. I kept going. I passed the old barn foundation, just a few concrete blocks and moss-covered beams now. The shed was still mostly standing, though its roof had caved in. I didn't go inside. I remembered stories of copperheads nesting in the woodpile behind it, and I didn't feel like testing my luck. I wandered past it into the trees, not really following a path anymore, just walking in the general direction of the small stream that used to run behind the property. That's where I planned to sit and have lunch, maybe skip a rock or two. I hadn't done that in years. It took me longer to find the stream than I remembered. The woods had grown thicker, and some areas had changed shape completely. I crossed a few dry creeks, climbed over some fallen logs, and finally came to the stream, or what was left of it. It was smaller than I remembered, just a trickle now, with patches of stagnant water trapped between muddy rocks. I stood there for a moment, hands on my hips, disappointed. But I sat anyway, ate my sandwich, dronk half my water. I took some photos of the mossy trees and the cracked stones by the stream. For a while, it was just quiet. I started back a little after noon. I decided to take a slightly different route back, following what looked like a deer trail through the woods. The ground was soft from the recent rain, but not soaked. I could see boot prints, probably my own from earlier, but also deeper marks, cloven, wide like a deer or maybe a wild hog. I figured it was normal. About 10 minutes in, I came across something strange. There was a fresh pile of dirt off to the side of the trail, maybe 6 feet wide and 2 feet high. At first, I thought it was just an animal digging for grubs or roots, but it was too neat. The edges were clean, almost squared off, like someone had used a shovel. But there were no shovel marks. No tools. I looked around for signs of anyone, other boot prints, maybe a bag or trash, but there was nothing. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at that mound. It wasn't shaped like a grave or anything, just a low hump of damp, freshly turned earth. The kind of thing you wouldn't notice unless you stepped right on it. But something about it felt off. I didn't dig into it or touch it. I just kept walking. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. It wasn't paranoia exactly, just a slow, creeping awareness. You know that feeling when someone stares at you too long in a store? It was like that, but stretched out. I stopped walking a couple times and turned around slowly, but nothing was there. The woods were quiet again. Too quiet. I moved faster after that. I stopped taking pictures. I didn't even finish my water. I just wanted to be back at the truck. I was less than a mile out when I started hearing the noise. It was a slow, crunching sound. Leaves and twigs breaking behind me, maybe 100 feet back. It was steady, not like an animal darting through the brush. More like a person walking, but deliberately not trying to hide. I stopped again and turned. Nothing. I crouched low, staring into the trees, trying to catch any sign of movement. Nothing moved. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then I heard it again, this time off to the left, maybe 50 feet away. Still slow. Still steady. I don't know why I didn't call out. Maybe I didn't want to break the silence. Maybe I didn't want a response. I started walking again, faster now, barely keeping to the trail. My boots slipped a few times in the mud, but I didn't stop to check. I just kept going. The sound followed. Always behind, always just far enough that I couldn't see the source. I started running. Branches slapped my arms and face. I tripped once, skinned my hand, kept running. My heart was pounding. My lungs burned. I burst out of the trees into the clearing near the shed and didn't stop until I reached the truck. The truck was untouched. Everything inside was the way I left it. I locked the doors the second I climbed in and started the engine. I backed out so fast, I almost hit the gate post. I didn't even bother closing the gate behind me. I didn't stop driving until I reached the main road. My hands were shaking. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. I looked in the rearview mirror over and over, half expecting to see someone step out of the trees. But there was nothing. I told myself it was just an animal. Maybe a hog. Maybe a stray dog. But the footsteps, they were too even. Too slow. No rustling, no darting, no growls. Just crunch, crunch, crunch. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw trees. I saw the dirt mound. I heard footsteps. The next day, I called the county office. Asked if anyone else had reported trespassers out near that part of the woods. The woman on the phone was polite, but said no. No recent calls. No hikers. No squatters. I didn't go back. I tried to forget about it. I pushed it out of my head for months. But it didn't leave me. About 6 months later, I got a call from my cousin. She had gone out there with her boyfriend to camp. I hadn't told her what happened. I never told anyone. She asked if I remembered where the old shed was, and I said yes. Why? She said they found something strange. Fresh dirt, soft and piled. No tools. No tire marks. No prints. Just a mound. She said they left early. 2 days after that, I drove out there again. I don't know why. I told myself it was to get closure, to prove to myself there was nothing to be afraid of. I brought a shovel this time. I found the same mound. A little flatter now, like time had started to level it out, but still distinct. I walked a wide circle around it for 30 minutes. No footprints. No trail cameras. No gear. No signs of recent activity. Just the mound. I stood over it and hesitated. My grip on the shovel was tight. My palms were sweating. I didn't want to dig, but I did. The top layer was soft, like it had been turned not long ago. The smell was heavy, earthy, not rotten. I dug slowly, shallow at first. The first foot revealed nothing but dirt and stones. I kept going. Around the 2-foot mark, the smell changed. It wasn't strong, but it was there. Sour. Metallic. I stopped when I hit something that wasn't dirt. It was cloth. I froze. My stomach turned. I pushed the dirt aside gently. More cloth. A jacket, maybe canvas, maybe denim. Faded. Dirty. I kept digging until I uncovered what was unmistakably a shoulder. I couldn't breathe. I backed away and dropped the shovel. My legs went numb. I didn't know what to do. Eventually, I called the sheriff. They came out, taped it off, asked me questions, took my statement. 3 days later, they confirmed what I already knew. It was a man, maybe in his 40s. No ID, no wallet, no phone, no missing person report that matched. They said he'd been dead for a while, maybe 6 months, maybe more, buried by hand. No signs of trauma, no weapons. They called it suspicious, but didn't have much to go on. I asked them if they'd found any other graves out there. They said no. I never went back. I sold my part of the land to a timber company. They cleared the whole area 6 months later. Shed, trees, everything. But I still think about it. I think about the footsteps, the silence in the woods, the way that mound looked so fresh, so precise, like it had just been made. I wonder if the person who buried that man was still out there when I walked past. I wonder if I'd stayed 5 minutes longer, what would have happened. And most of all, I wonder how many other mounds are out there, just waiting, hidden beneath leaves and time. I never used to think much about long-distance driving. I didn't love it, but it was just one of those things I had to do. My job sometimes required it, checking on remote work sites, delivering equipment, inspecting projects, stuff like that. It was part of the deal, and I was used to spending hours alone in the cab of my pickup truck, listening to static radio or just the rumble of tires on the road. This story happened about 2 years ago, August, middle of summer. I had a job to do in a rural part of the state, out near the edge of the national forest, miles away from any real town. The kind of area where you could drive for an hour and not see another car. Just fields, trees, and the occasional rundown barn or sagging fence. The job wasn't complicated. One of our subcontractors had delivered some material to the wrong location, a whole load of steel beams, and I needed to confirm their condition and help coordinate moving them to the right site. I figured it'd be a simple check-in, take a few pictures, make a few calls, and head back home the same day. I left a little after noon, expecting to arrive by around 4:30 p.m. That gave me enough time to look things over and hit the road before dark. That was the plan. The first part of the drive was fine, typical highways, light traffic. But the farther I got from the city, the thinner everything got. The roads narrowed, the gas stations disappeared, and then came the back roads, those cracked two-lane things that go twisting through empty fields and piney woods, the ones with faded signs and no shoulder, just a hard drop into dirt. About 20 minutes from my destination, I lost cell signal completely. No bars, not even a flicker. It didn't worry me much at first. Plenty of places out here had no service. I downloaded the area maps ahead of time. I figured I was fine. I reached the site around 5. It was basically a wide clearing off a dirt access road, surrounded by scrub brush and tall trees. The steel beams were there, half sunk in weeds, right where the delivery crew had left them. No one else was around, just me and the quiet. I stepped out of the truck, and the sound hit me nothing. Just hot, still air. No wind, no bugs, no birds. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I got to work, took some photos, walked around the beams, checking for damage. Took notes in my little notebook, since there was no point trying to send emails or anything. I climbed back into the truck around 5:45, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. I turned the key. Nothing. The dash lights flickered, then went black. No click. No engine turn. Dead. I tried again. Still nothing. I swore under my breath, popped the hood, and got out. I'm not a mechanic, but I can check a battery connection, jiggle some cables. Everything looked fine. No corrosion. Wires looked tight. But it was dead. That was when the real problem sank in. No phone signal. I was stranded. I told myself not to panic. I had water in the truck. Snacks. A flashlight. Tools. Even a blanket. Worst case, I'd sleep in the cab and figure it out in the morning. But that thought, spending the night out here, made my stomach twist. I checked the map on my phone. Even though there was no signal, the GPS still worked. It showed a road about 3 miles south that looked a bit more traveled. If I could make it there, maybe someone would drive by. Maybe I could catch a signal. It wasn't dark yet, and I didn't want to waste daylight sitting around. I locked up the truck, stuffed my essentials into a small backpack, and started walking. The dirt road was rough and overgrown. I kept having to dodge branches and push through waist-high grass. After a while, the trees thickened. The light started to dim, even though the sun wasn't down yet. Everything started to feel closer, like the forest was pressing in. I kept walking. After maybe 40 minutes, I came to an old barbed wire fence, mostly collapsed. I climbed over it, tearing a hole in my sleeve. The land beyond looked like a clearing, wide open flat. I figured it was some kind of old pasture or field. I crossed it, hoping it would take me closer to the road. That's when I saw the house. It wasn't on the map, wasn't mentioned in any of the property reports. But there it was, half hidden in the trees on the far side of the field. Small, plain, one story. Looked abandoned. The windows were dark, and the porch sagged like it hadn't been walked on in years. I don't know why, but I felt pulled toward it. Maybe I was hoping someone lived there. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was just the idea that shelter, even an old shack, was better than being alone in the woods. I walked up slowly. No signs of life. No car, no path, no mailbox. The yard was wild, the grass up to my knees. I stepped onto the porch and knocked. Nothing. I tried the door. It creaked open. Inside, the air was stale. Dust floated in the light from the doorway. The floorboards creaked under my boots. There was furniture, a table, a chair, an old couch. But everything was coated in dust and grime. The kitchen looked like no one had touched it in years. But it didn't feel destroyed, just left behind. I looked around for a landline phone. Nothing. Then I found something strange. On the table in the living room, there was a single piece of paper. Clean. No dust on it. It was lined notebook paper, like from a school notebook. And in the center, written in big blocky letters, was one word. Leave. That was it. No signature. No explanation. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the table. Suddenly the silence of the house felt louder, heavier. I turned around and walked out fast, down the porch steps, across the field. I didn't run, but I wanted to. The trees seemed thicker on the way back. I didn't take the exact same path. I was walking faster, almost jogging, scanning for that road. The sky had started turning orange. I was getting tired. The backpack felt heavier. My shirt clung to me with sweat. I wiped my face, but my hands were dirty, and now my face was too. I kept moving. Then I heard something behind me. It was faint, but it was there. A rustle. A snap. I stopped walking and held my breath. Nothing. I turned slowly. The trees behind me were still. Empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there watching. I kept walking. Faster. The sound came again. Closer. A definite step. I stopped again. Looked back. Still nothing. I told myself it was a deer. A raccoon. Anything. But I couldn't ignore how it seemed to match my pace. When I stopped, it stopped. I kept walking. This time I didn't stop. The sun was almost gone now. The woods were filling with shadows. I pulled out my flashlight and flicked it on. The beam was weak, but enough to see the trail ahead. That's when I heard the whistle. Short, sharp, like someone calling a dog. I froze. Another whistle. Closer. My breath caught in my throat. I turned in a slow circle, flashlight scanning the woods. Nothing. But then I saw it. Far off, behind the trees, something moved. A shape. Human, maybe. Standing still. Watching. I didn't wait. I started running. The trail curved and dipped. Roots tried to trip me. Branches slapped my arms. I didn't care. I just ran. I heard footsteps behind me now. Not quiet ones. Fast. Heavy. Running. I didn't look back. I ran until my legs screamed. Until I thought I'd puke. Until I stumbled out onto gravel. It was the road. The one from the map. I staggered to a stop, chest heaving. I looked behind me. Nothing. No one came out of the woods. But I could still hear something. Breathing. Just past the tree line. I backed away from the edge of the forest, down the road. Kept backing up, never turning around, until the trees started to thin. Then, in the distance, I saw headlights. I ran toward them, waving my arms. It was a dusty old pickup. The driver, a man in his 60s, slammed on the brakes and rolled down his window, staring at me like I was crazy. I didn't explain. I just asked if he could give me a ride to the nearest town. He hesitated, then nodded. I climbed in. We drove in silence for a while. I kept looking back, half expecting to see someone chasing us. When we got to town, just a gas station and a diner, I thanked him and went inside. My phone still had no signal, but they had a landline. I called a tow service. While I waited, I told the guy behind the counter about the house. He frowned, said there wasn't any house out there. I described it, small, one-story, near the edge of a field. He just shook his head, said there used to be a place like that, decades ago. Belonged to some old man who lived alone, but it burned down in the 80s. Nothing left now but the foundation. I didn't argue. The tow truck came. We drove back to my pickup. The driver hooked it up without talking. I kept glancing at the woods. The next day, my truck started on the first try. No explanation. No dead battery. Nothing wrong. I've thought about that day a lot since then. The old house. The paper on the table. The shape in the trees. The footsteps. I don't know who or what was out there, but I believe the note. Next time, I'll leave. It started with something as normal as needing a break. I'd been working from home for months, stuck behind a screen, barely moving, always tired. My body felt weak, my mind felt foggy, and no matter how much I slept, I never felt rested. One Thursday morning, I shut my laptop mid-task and stared at the wall. Something clicked in me. I needed out, not just for a few hours. I needed space, silence, nature. I needed to be far from people, from work, from everything. By Friday morning, I had my bag packed and my car filled with enough supplies for a weekend. My plan was simple: drive up into the foothills outside town, past the paved roads and the fenced properties, find a quiet place in the forest where there's no cell signal, set up my tent, hike a bit, maybe read a book or just sleep. I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going. I just texted a friend that I'd be out of range for the weekend and left it at that. The drive up was peaceful. The road wound through dry farmland before climbing into dense pines. The farther I went, the fewer houses I saw. After about 2 hours, I turned off onto an unmarked dirt path I had found once before while exploring with a friend. It led through a narrow cut in the trees and opened up into a flat patch surrounded by hills and thick forest. I hadn't seen a single other car in nearly an hour. I parked the car, grabbed my gear, and hiked a bit further off the road just to be sure I wouldn't be seen from anywhere. The spot I chose was perfect. A clearing surrounded by trees on 3 sides, with a steep drop-off on the 4th that overlooked a gully. It was quiet. No road noise, no people, just the wind and the trees. I set up my small tent, unrolled my sleeping bag, and made a small fire pit with some rocks nearby. I sat for a while after that, just listening. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the constant buzz in my head. That night, I didn't even bother with dinner. I ate a granola bar, drank some water, and climbed into my sleeping bag early. It was still warm out, so I left the rain fly off the tent and just stared up at the sky through the mesh. The stars were unreal. I must have drifted off sometime around 9 or 10. I woke up around 1:30 a.m. My bladder was screaming at me. I climbed out of the tent half asleep and walked a few yards away to relieve myself. The air was colder now, and the forest felt different. I couldn't explain it, but it felt heavier. The way the wind moved through the trees sounded more like breathing than rustling. When I turned to head back to the tent, I noticed something weird. There was a light, just a faint, barely there glow, off in the woods, maybe 200 feet away. It was low to the ground, like someone had dropped a flashlight and left it on. It didn't flicker, didn't move. At first, I thought it might be a reflection or some kind of weird moonlight, but the moon wasn't even out. My stomach tightened. I stood still, staring at it, waiting for something to happen, but it just stayed there. I backed into my tent and zipped it up, heart pounding. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe a reflection off some trash. Maybe a glow stick someone dropped long ago. But then the questions started piling up. Who would have been out here? This wasn't a campsite. There were no trails nearby. I hadn't seen a car or person for hours. Eventually, I fell asleep again. When I woke up at sunrise, I unzipped the tent slowly and peeked out. The forest looked normal. Bright, green, peaceful. No sign of the light. I made some coffee on my little camp stove and ate a protein bar. I debated walking over to where the light had been, but I didn't want to mess with it. I didn't come out here to play detective. I just wanted space. That morning, I hiked a few miles out along a dry creek bed, following deer trails. I found a rocky outcrop that overlooked the valley and sat there for hours. I didn't see a single person or animal the entire time. When I got back to camp around mid-afternoon, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The rocks around my fire pit had been moved. Not all of them, just enough that it was obvious. A few had been pulled outward like someone was trying to dismantle it. My first thought was an animal, but there was no sign of digging or paw prints. No scattered trash. Just the rocks, moved by hand. I stood there, staring, not moving, feeling the heat drain from my body. My ears were ringing. Something about it felt off. Way off. It wasn't damage. It wasn't chaos. It was methodical. I checked my tent. Nothing looked disturbed. My bag was still zipped. Food was still in the bare canister. No sign of anything stolen or messed with. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I walked a slow circle around my campsite, looking for tracks. The ground was dry and packed, not ideal for footprints, but in a softer patch behind the tent, I found something. A single heel print. Human. Facing the tent. I stared at it for a long time, not knowing what to do. It was old enough that it could have been mine, but I didn't remember walking there. I usually came from the other side. That evening, I didn't cook dinner. I just sat in my camp chair, my eyes scanning the trees, the brush, the shadows. Every sound made me jump. I tried to act normal, but my body was on high alert. I debated packing up and leaving, but the sun was already dropping. Driving those back roads in the dark wasn't a great option. I told myself I'd leave first thing in the morning. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I heard something. A stick breaking, a shuffle in the dirt, breathing. I kept unzipping the tent, shining my flashlight out into the trees, but saw nothing. Around 3 a.m., I heard something that froze me. A whistle. Not a bird call. Not wind. A long, slow, high-pitched whistle. From the direction of the gully behind the tent. Maybe 100 feet away. It didn't repeat. It was just once. I laid there, barely breathing, my heart hammering so loud I thought it would shake the tent. I didn't move until daylight. When the sun rose, I got out fast. I packed up everything, not even caring how sloppily I shoved it into my bag. I just wanted out. As I hoisted my pack and turned toward the direction of the car, I noticed something new. Something that hadn't been there before. Tied to a small branch near the edge of the clearing was a piece of string, about 2 feet long. It looked fresh, bright white, no dirt or weathering. It was tied in a loop. Not just a knot. A loop. Like a snare. A trap. It wasn't there the day before. I stared at it for a long time, then kept walking. The hike back to the car felt longer than before. Every rustle made me jump. I kept spinning around, sure I'd see someone behind me. But there was nothing. When I finally reached the car, I threw my gear in the back, locked the doors, and drove. I didn't even stop to eat. I didn't look back. I made it home that afternoon. I took the longest shower of my life, turned on all the lights in my apartment, and sat on the couch shaking. I told myself it was nothing, that I had spooked myself, that it was all explainable. But that night, as I emptied my bag to air out my gear, I found something I couldn't explain. Inside the side pocket of my backpack, one I never use, was a small rock. Smooth, flat, black. It wasn't mine. I hadn't picked it up. It wasn't there when I packed. There was something scratched into the surface. Faint but clear. A straight vertical line with 2 diagonal slashes crossing it. Almost like a tally mark. That was the last time I ever went camping alone. I didn't report anything. I didn't tell my friend who I had texted. I didn't post about it online. I didn't want to think about who or what might have been out there. Maybe someone lives off-grid out there and doesn't like visitors. Maybe it was some twisted prank. Or maybe someone was waiting for something, or someone else. Maybe I left just in time. Since then, I always check my car twice before I drive. I make sure no one follows me home. I leave lights on even during the day. I haven't felt safe since, and I don't think I ever will again. I never thought a quick solo hike to clear my head would turn into something I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. But here I am, years later, and I still can't go near the edge of a tree line without my chest tightening up. It started out as a normal day. I had been feeling burnout from work and wanted some quiet time. I drove out early to a spot I found online, about 2 hours from home, called the Little Bear Loop. It wasn't too popular, but not completely unknown either. I figured it would give me a few hours alone without being too remote or dangerous. The full loop was about 8 miles, not too tough, mostly flat, just a few slopes. I packed light, a small day pack with 2 bottles of water, a sandwich, my wallet, a cheap first aid kit, and my phone. I wore my usual hiking clothes, moisture-wicking shirt, light jacket, trail pants, and boots I had broken in months ago. I parked in the small gravel lot around 9:30 a.m. There were only 2 other cars there, which comforted me. I wasn't going to be entirely alone, but it wasn't crowded either. The air was cool, crisp. No clouds in the sky. It felt good to stretch my legs and breathe clean air for once. The first few miles were peaceful. Birds chirped from the canopy above, and small lizards darted across the trail as I walked. I passed a small creek around mile 2, and the sound of water was calming. I took my time, stopping occasionally to take pictures or sip water. Every so often I'd hear a branch snap in the distance, probably from deer or maybe even a raccoon. I didn't pay much attention to it. By the time I hit mile 4, the halfway point of the loop, the trail narrowed and dipped into a shaded patch of thicker forest. I noticed it got colder there, and the sound seemed different, not silent, just duller. The way the trees crowded and made the light feel odd, even though the sun was still out. I felt a little uneasy, but I chalked it up to the isolation and pressed on. Around this point, I realized I hadn't seen another person all day. No hikers coming the opposite direction, no one passing me. I started glancing over my shoulder more than usual, just checking. I told myself not to be paranoid, but still, I listened more carefully to the woods. A little after that, I came to a fork I didn't remember seeing on the trail map. There was no sign, no marker. Just 2 trails splitting off like AY. The left looked more worn in, like the main path. The right was narrower, overgrown, but it curved slightly uphill and looked like it might reconnect. I took out my phone to check the map app, but of course, no signal. I tried to load the offline map I downloaded, but it wouldn't open. I stood there for a while trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I decided to stick with the left path. It seemed more traveled. I figured even if I was off the loop, it would eventually lead somewhere. But after about 20 minutes of walking, the trail got worse, less maintained, full of fallen branches, even old trash like a rusted can and half-buried beer bottle. It didn't feel right. My gut told me I'd made the wrong choice. I turned around, but when I got back to where the fork had been, I couldn't find it. I walked in circles, scanning the woods for that split. The trail just looked like one long stretch now, no fork in sight, no sign I'd ever turned. I felt this hollow sinking feeling in my stomach. I tried to calm down and told myself I'd retrace my steps. I looked for landmarks, the weird tree with the split trunk, the flat rock near the muddy patch, but everything started blending together. I walked for nearly an hour, trying to get back to the creek I had crossed earlier. I never found it. Panic was creeping in, even though I kept telling myself I wasn't truly lost. The sun was still high, I had water, and even if I had to backtrack the whole trail, I'd be fine. But I was sweating harder now, even though the air was still cool. My ears started ringing a little, and every crack or snap in the woods sounded louder. Then, I started to notice something that made my skin crawl. Footprints. Not mine. Someone else's. A pair of boot prints ahead of me, going the same direction I was now walking. I squatted down to look at them closer. They were fresh. The ground wasn't muddy, but soft enough to hold the shape. I hadn't noticed them earlier. They weren't from a deer or animal. Definitely human. At first, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe someone else was nearby. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. I followed them. They stayed ahead of me, just enough that I couldn't see whoever made them. But I heard no voices, no footsteps, nothing. Just the occasional rustle in the trees that could have been wind. I called out once, just a hey, but my voice sounded strange in the thick woods, and I regretted it immediately. No response. The tracks eventually led into an area where the trees thinned out, and the ground sloped down into a shallow ravine. I stopped at the edge, scanning the area. That's when I noticed something that made the hairs on my neck stand up. There were more prints now. At least 2 other sets, maybe 3. They crisscrossed and circled, like people had been pacing or turning around in this one spot. I couldn't explain why, but the pattern looked off. Not like a normal group of hikers. It felt wrong. Disorganized, frantic maybe. I slowly backed away and decided I didn't want to follow that path anymore. As I turned to leave, I heard a branch snap, very clearly, up the ridge behind me. I froze. I didn't look back right away. I just stood there, every muscle tight, heart pounding. The snap was followed by the sound of leaves shifting, slow, deliberate. Something or someone was moving, not rushing, but not hiding either. I finally turned around, scanning the trees. I didn't see anything at first. Then I caught the faintest glimpse of movement behind a thick tree trunk, just a quick shift, like someone pulling back. I stared for a long time. My eyes played tricks on me in the shadows, but I swear I saw something standing there. Not charging at me, just watching. I backed up, carefully, keeping my eyes on that spot. Then I turned and walked fast, not running, but close to it. I didn't look back again. The trail felt different now. Narrower. The trees leaned in. I kept glancing behind me, certain I was being followed, but I never saw anything. Still, the footsteps in the undergrowth never completely stopped. They were faint, slow, but there. I tried to stay quiet, even controlled my breathing, but the rhythm of those steps never matched mine. They were always just a second behind or off to the side. Eventually, I saw a small clearing and rushed toward it, thinking it might help me get oriented. But what I found was worse than anything so far. In the center of the clearing was a tarp, old, dirty, sun-faded. Next to it, a small fire pit, long cold. Scattered around were crushed food wrappers, a rusted camp chair, and what looked like bones, animal, I think. But they were too clean, bleached almost. I stepped forward carefully, the air around it eerily still. Then I noticed the smell. Not strong, not like rot. More like mildew, wet dog, and something sour. It hit me suddenly, and I had to cover my mouth. That's when I saw it, nailed to a nearby tree, almost at eye level. A boot. Just one, tied by its laces, hanging like some kind of warning. The tread was worn out. I don't know why, but I knew it belonged to someone who didn't leave here willingly. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I just ran in a straight line, dodging trees, branches whipping my arms and legs. I ran until my lungs burned, until I tripped over a root and hit the ground hard. My knee screamed, but I forced myself up. I didn't know where I was anymore, just deeper in the woods, no idea which way was north. I started walking again, limping. Every few steps, I thought I heard movement behind me. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it started again. The worst part, there was never a clear sighting, never a figure stepping out from the trees. Just that constant feeling, being watched, being followed. I started talking to myself, quietly, just to hear a voice. I wanted to feel like I wasn't going insane. Hours passed. The sun dipped low. The air turned colder. I still hadn't found the trail, and my water was gone. My lips were dry, and I was starting to feel dizzy. That's when I saw the fence. A chain-link fence, bent and rusted in places. Not tall, maybe 6 feet. I had no idea what it was doing out here. No buildings, no signs. Just a long fence cutting through the woods. But beyond it, I saw a narrow dirt road. My heart jumped. A road meant people. Safety. I climbed the fence, ripped my jacket, cut my palm, but I didn't care. I stumbled onto the road and started limping down it, hoping it would lead somewhere. After maybe 20 minutes, I saw lights. Not headlights, actual lights on a building. A small ranger station, closed for the season, but there was a phone box mounted to the wall. I picked it up, and it connected me to dispatch. My voice cracked as I tried to explain where I was. They tracked the call and sent someone. When the ranger arrived, he looked confused when I told him where I thought I'd been. He said the loop trail doesn't fork at any point, that there's no offshoot trail like I described. I insisted. He agreed to go check it with me the next day. I went home, slept for 12 hours straight. The next morning, I met him at the station. We walked the loop together. No fork, no ravine, no clearing, none of it. I knew what I saw, what I felt, but it was like that part of the forest had swallowed everything back up. He humored me, but clearly thought I was just dehydrated or panicked. I stopped trying to explain, but I know what happened. Something or someone was out there, watching, following, waiting, and sometimes when I can't sleep, I think about the other boot, the missing one, and wonder where it ended up. The land looked flat from the road, but once I stepped off the gravel and started hiking toward the property line, I realized it wasn't. It dipped and curved in strange ways, and none of it made sense on paper. I had bought 20 acres of land in northern Minnesota, mostly pine, some clearings. The satellite photos showed a couple of overgrown trails and what looked like the remains of an old cabin tucked in the farthest corner near the creek. That part had caught my eye. I wasn't interested in building a home out there or turning it into anything fancy. I just wanted to get away from people and maybe build a little off-grid place, just for myself. No running water, no power, nothing. Just quiet. The first time I walked the property, it was in early October. Cool air, yellow leaves falling, the whole cliché. I parked my truck off the gravel road near the rusted-out barbed wire fence that marked the west edge. I left it running for a bit while I laced up my boots in the driver's seat. I remember watching the exhaust curl up in the rearview mirror and feeling this strange calm settle over me. It was the kind of place where you could just vanish into the trees and not see another person for weeks. That was what I wanted. That's why I paid cash. I brought my pack, some water, a paper map I'd marked up from the county survey, and a machete to cut through anything overgrown. The first few hundred feet were easy enough. An old ATV trail, probably used by hunters or whoever owned the place before me. The deeper I went, the more the land changed. It didn't slope up or down, really. It just shifted. Like the kind of unevenness you don't notice with your eyes, but you feel in your knees and ankles. The ground felt soft, even dry as it was. Pine needles built up thick on the forest floor, and in some places, the trail vanished under them completely. I kept heading east, following the line I'd drawn on the map, using the angle of the sun to guide me. I'd been hiking through woods my whole life, scouting, hunting, camping. I knew how to move without getting turned around. But after maybe 2 hours, I stopped walking and realized I had no idea where I was. That was the first time I noticed it. The quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet you get in the woods. This was different. No wind, no birds, no bugs. Just silence. Like a padded room. I thought it might just be the way the trees were packed in. Maybe the sound was being muffled somehow. But it got to me. I tried shaking it off, kept moving forward. I figured I was just overthinking it. I'd get to the old cabin site near the creek and circle back. Only I never found the creek. I walked and walked, and the trees stayed the same. Pines, some birch. No slope, no opening. And I started seeing the same tree formations again. A broken branch in a Y shape hanging from a low limb. A pile of rocks by a stump. A half-buried tire near a patch of thick moss. I'd already passed all of them. I stopped, pulled the map out, checked my compass. The needle was jittering, not spinning, but shaking side to side, like it couldn't decide where north was. I stood still for a long time, longer than I should have. I listened for something, anything, but it was still completely quiet. I looked at the trees around me and realized I couldn't tell which direction I'd come from. I tried to calm myself. Sat down on a fallen log, drank some water, ate a protein bar. I told myself it was just nerves. I wasn't lost. I was just disoriented. All I had to do was backtrack. Use the sun again. Even if I didn't make it to the cabin site, I could still make it back to the truck. I gave myself 15 minutes to rest, then stood up and started moving west, where the sun had been behind me earlier. I told myself if I just kept walking that way, I'd hit the fence again. I walked for hours. The trees didn't change. The quiet didn't lift. I checked my watch over and over, but the sun barely moved in the sky. It didn't make sense. I should have at least heard something, wind, birds, anything, but it stayed dead quiet. I started to panic a little. My breaths got short. I had to force myself to stop again, sit down, and breathe slow. I marked the spot I stopped in by sticking my machete in a tree, just to make sure I wasn't looping around. Then I walked straight in one direction for 20 minutes, watching the compass the whole time. I turned around to check if the machete was gone from view. It wasn't. I could still see it sticking out of the tree behind me. I hadn't gone anywhere. That was when I started walking faster. Not running, just faster. My legs ached, but I didn't care. I needed to get back to the truck before it got dark. I didn't want to be out here overnight. I didn't even care about the land anymore. I just wanted out. The sun started to drop, finally. The sky turned pink through the treetops, but it felt fake, like I was inside a snow globe and someone painted a sunset on the top. I couldn't explain it, but it felt wrong. Then I saw something. Up ahead, maybe 50 yards, I saw a shape through the trees. It wasn't a person, not an animal either. It was something man-made, tall, rusty. I pushed through the brush, my heart beating fast. As I got closer, I saw it clearly, a watchtower, or what was left of one. The kind forest rangers used back in the day. The bottom supports were rotted out, and it leaned badly to one side, but it was real. It was something. I climbed the base carefully. The steps groaned and swayed under my weight. At the top, there was a half-collapsed platform with just enough space to sit. From up there, I could see above the trees. That should have made me feel better. But all I saw were trees. Trees in every direction. No road, no fence, no creek, no clearings. Just endless pine forest in every direction. That was the first night. I slept in short bursts, waking up cold, stiff, and terrified every time I heard a creak or sway. I saw no lights, no stars, just thick clouds. In the morning, I climbed down, ate the last of my food, drank the rest of my water. Then I started walking again. The second day felt longer. The silence pressed harder. My mouth dried up fast. I tried to chew pine needles for moisture, but it only made my tongue raw. Around mid-afternoon, I saw a rabbit, first sign of life since I'd gotten out there. I tried to follow it, thinking maybe it would lead to water, but it vanished quick. My legs started to shake from exhaustion. My boots felt like lead. I knew I couldn't make it through another night. Then I saw smoke, just a thin column, rising straight up from behind a small hill. I didn't even think, I just moved. I didn't care what it was. I just wanted people. Anything. When I got close, I found a small clearing with a half-collapsed cabin in the center. The smoke was coming from a metal chimney, crooked and blackened. Someone had made a fire inside. I moved up slowly, heart pounding. The front door was gone, just a dark opening. The roof was half missing. Inside, there was a fire burning low in a stone hearth, but no one around. No chairs, no supplies, no gear. Just smoke and ashes and the smell of burnt wood. I stepped inside, called out, but there was no answer. I looked around, found an old bucket in the corner and a tin cup on the floor. I scooped ash out of the hearth, hoping to find a log still burning. I broke off part of it and carried it out, thinking I could use it to light a signal fire. That's when I saw the footprints. Fresh ones, leading away from the cabin. Bare feet. No shoes, no socks. Deep impressions in the soft dirt. like someone heavy had walked straight into the woods. I froze. It didn't make sense. The fire was burning. Someone had to be here. But they left barefoot, and I never saw them. I didn't want to follow the prints. Everything in my gut told me not to. I turned and walked the other way, away from the cabin. I figured I'd build a signal fire in a clearing, stay there until someone found me. I walked until I found a patch of open grass and dry wood. I built the fire as big as I could, using the ember I'd carried from the cabin. The smoke rose fast, black and thick. I sat by it and waited. And waited. No planes. No people. No change in the trees. Just the fire, and the smell of pine, and the terrible silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up, back to a tree, gripping a broken branch like a club. I thought I heard footsteps, but they were faint, too faint to be sure. At one point, I saw something move in the trees. Just for a second. A flash of pale skin. Then it was gone. By morning, the fire had died, and my throat was dry enough to make me dizzy. I knew I had to find water. I followed the low spots in the land, hoping they'd lead to a creek or pond. My map was useless. The compass needle still twitched like it was nervous. Then I found a deer carcass. Half-eaten. Fresh. Steam still rising from the torn open belly. No buzzards, no flies. Just meat and blood and torn fur. Something was close. I backed away slowly. Moved off at an angle. I didn't run. I didn't want to make noise. My legs ached with every step. My mouth felt like sand. I started chewing leaves, sucking dew off them. I didn't care anymore. I just needed to survive. At some point that afternoon, I stumbled across an old fence line. Posts mostly rotten, barbed wire twisted and sagging. But it was something man-made. I followed it. 2 hours later, I saw the road. It was the gravel road I'd come in on. My truck was gone. I didn't know how many days had passed. I staggered out of the woods, fell onto the gravel, and laid there for what felt like forever. A passing car finally stopped. I couldn't even speak. Just pointed, gasped, and collapsed again. They took me to a hospital in Duluth. I'd been gone for 5 days. I went back with search and rescue 2 weeks later. They couldn't find the tower, or the cabin. The old dirt road stretched out in front of me, long and empty, swallowed up by trees on both sides. It wasn't even supposed to be a road, more like a logging path that hadn't seen traffic in years. The ruts were deep, and every few feet there were tree roots pushing through the cracked earth. I was following it because Google Maps had lost its signal about half an hour ago, and the blue dot had stopped moving. I'd already turned around twice, and ended up in the same place both times. I was supposed to be at the cabin by 5. It was now past 7. Sunlight was thinning fast, and I was nowhere close to anything that looked like a cabin or even a house. I had rented this cabin for a weekend alone, just a chance to unplug, write, and get some peace. It was in the middle of nowhere, tucked deep in the woods of northern Michigan. The listing said it was peaceful and remote, perfect for those seeking solitude. I should have thought about that a little more. I wasn't expecting the GPS to stop working or to lose signal this fast. I hadn't seen another car for over an hour, and the further I drove, the more the trees seemed to close in around the road. The silence in these woods was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was thick, heavy, like the trees were holding their breath. The rental car, a beat-up gray SUV, bounced as I went over another deep rut. My hands were gripping the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. I kept glancing at the fuel gauge, a little under a quarter tank. I figured if I didn't find the cabin soon, I'd have to turn back and sleep in the car. I didn't want to, but I didn't want to get lost out here in the dark either. Then the road narrowed. It hadn't been wide to begin with, but now branches were scratching the sides of the car, and the wheels were sliding in the soft dirt. I slowed down, rolling at maybe 5 miles per hour, trying to spot anything through the trees. Just more woods. Thick trees with trunks like pillars. No signs, no lights, nothing. I spotted a clearing up ahead and figured I'd stop there. Maybe get out and walk a bit, see if I could spot a trail or anything that looked like a cabin. The road curved slightly and opened up into a rough patch of grass and stumps. I pulled the car in and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was jarring. No birds, no bugs, just nothing. I got out and immediately noticed how quiet it really was. My boots crunched on the gravel and dry twigs. I walked around the car, trying to get a better look through the trees. Still nothing but woods. I thought maybe I could climb one of the small hills to get a better look, but everything around was too dense. The trees were so close together, it was like a wall of bark and branches. I grabbed my phone again. No signal, not even a bar. I tried walking a bit up the road. Holding the phone up like that would help. It didn't. I considered honking the horn a few times. Maybe someone would hear it, but who? I hadn't passed a single house in miles. No driveways, no mailboxes, nothing. I went back to the car and pulled out my backpack. If I was going to try and find this cabin on foot, I needed water and a flashlight. I grabbed both from the passenger seat, zipped the bag, and slung it over my shoulders. I looked at the slant of the road and guessed that downhill would eventually lead to something, maybe a river or a road that actually went somewhere. I locked the car, not because I thought anyone would steal it out here, but because it felt right. Then I started walking. The road curved again and dipped into a low, swampy area. The air got thicker there. The smell changed too, wet moss, old leaves, and mud. I had to pick my steps carefully. There were spots where water had gathered in shallow pools. Bugs buzzed around my face and neck. I waved them off, trying to stay on the dry parts. That's when I heard the first sound. It wasn't loud, just a quick crunch of leaves off to my left, deeper in the woods. I froze and looked in that direction. I didn't see anything, but I stood still for a long minute listening. Nothing, just silence again. I kept walking. Another 5 minutes down the road, I heard it again, this time behind me. Same kind of sound, crunching leaves, like someone had stepped on a branch and tried not to. I turned around fast, scanning the trees. Again, nothing. I stood there for a bit longer, my heart beating faster now. I told myself it was probably a deer, maybe a raccoon, but it didn't feel like that. The sound had weight, like something big. I started walking again, quicker now. My boots moved faster, kicking up dirt. I wanted to find something, anything, that looked like a cabin, a fence, a trail marker, but it was just trees everywhere. Then I heard it again, off to the right, closer this time. I didn't stop walking, but I pulled the flashlight from the side pocket of my bag and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark between the trees, but it didn't reach far. The woods were thick, way too thick. I was sweating now, even though the air was cool. I kept walking, faster now. I didn't want to run, not yet. But I was close. The sun was almost gone. The sky above the trees had faded to a dark gray blue. The road was nearly invisible now, just a faint line of dirt between the trees. Then the road ended. It didn't gradually fade. It just stopped, like someone had built this path halfway and then walked away. Trees had started growing where the road should have gone. No signs, no trail, just an abrupt wall of forest. I stopped, breathing hard, trying to make sense of it. That's when I heard it again. Behind me, clear this time. Not just a crunch. It was a footstep. And then another one. Not fast. Just one, then a pause. Then another. Steady. Measured. Human. I turned and shined the flashlight into the trees. Nothing moved, but I kept hearing it. Slow steps, just far enough back that I couldn't see what was making them. I backed up, almost stumbling. I was being followed. I didn't think. I just ran. I turned and pushed into the woods, away from the road, dodging trees, snapping branches with my legs and arms. The beam from the flashlight swung wildly with each step. I kept running until I couldn't hear the steps anymore. Then I stopped, breathing hard, my legs shaking. I turned off the flashlight and crouched low behind a fallen log. The woods around me were pitch dark now. I could barely make out the shapes of the trees against the sky. My heart was pounding. I waited, listening. Then I heard it again. Closer. Footsteps. Careful. Like someone was trying not to make noise, but the ground gave them away. The sound moved slowly through the woods, passing maybe 20 feet from where I crouched. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Whoever it was didn't use a light. That scared me more than anything. Because who walks through the woods at night without a flashlight? Unless they know the woods. Unless they've done this before. The footsteps faded again. I stayed crouched for a long time. I didn't know how long. My legs started to cramp, and the cold started sinking into my clothes. I finally turned the flashlight on again, holding my hand over the beam to dim it, just enough to see. I had no idea where I was. No trail. No road. Just woods. I stood slowly and started walking in the opposite direction of the footsteps. My body was sore from running, and my boots were wet. I moved slowly, stopping every few minutes to listen. At some point, I reached a slight rise. I climbed it and looked around. Through the trees far off, I saw a faint light. A single orange-yellow glow. I headed toward it, moving fast again. I didn't care what it was. Light meant something human. A porch, a lantern, anything. The trees started to thin slightly, and I saw it, an old wooden structure, maybe a shed or a small cabin. The light was coming from inside. I stopped at the edge of the trees and looked closer. The building looked old, leaning slightly. No car, no signs of life except that light. I didn't know what to do. Then I saw movement, a shape moving past the window. Not quickly, just walking, back and forth. I crouched again and waited, watching. The shape passed by the window again. Then the light inside turned off. Darkness swallowed the woods again. I backed away slowly, every instinct in me screaming to leave. Then I heard a new sound, a voice, not words, just a sound, low, almost a hum, coming from the trees behind me. I ran again. I didn't care about being quiet. I just ran. I didn't even know where. My legs were on fire, my chest tight. I tripped twice, once slamming my shoulder against a tree, once hitting the ground hard and scraping my hands. But I kept running. Eventually, I saw the reflection of metal in the dark. My car. I had somehow looped back around. I fumbled for the keys in my bag, hands shaking. Found them. Hit the unlock button. The headlights flashed once. That was a mistake. I heard the sound again. Closer. Branches snapping. Not just footsteps now. Running. I jumped in the car, slammed the door, and locked it. Threw the bag in the back and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine took a second to turn over. Then it roared to life. I slammed it into reverse, backed up fast, nearly hit a stump, then shifted into drive and tore down the dirt road. My tires slid in the mud, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove until I found pavement. I didn't stop until I hit the main highway. I pulled into a gas station lit up like a football field and sat there in the car for almost an hour, engine running, trying to stop shaking. I never found that cabin. I don't know who or what was in those woods, but I know this. Someone was following me, on foot, without a light, and they knew those woods better than I ever could. I canceled the reservation and never looked back. The listing